Hello, everybody. It is Corey Poirier back again with the Blue Talks event, and hope everybody is doing fantastic. I just mentioned off air I was having some technology fun, so that's lots of fun. Great way to start your event. We are here now, and that's what matters. So, Kelly, so great to be back again. And I guess just before we jump in, how's your day going? Anything that came up since yesterday's event? Anything that you want to share with us before we start jumping right in?
Well, it was really kind of fascinating this morning when I was waking up. Went on my social media, and I just love it when Facebook shows me my memories. And one of the memories that it popped up was 10 years ago. I was on the cover of a magazine called Be Fabulous that my friend Diana Bose put together. And it just kind of made me think, oh my gosh, I mean, I've been a speaker now for 10 years. Like, it just didn't clue into me that been doing that for 10 years. It's like, holy shit, right? So it's amazing how fast time flies. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally get that. I'm on the same sort of path. I'm just coming up on 20 years now. So 2002 is when I started as a paid speaker. So I guess that's literally what, just short of 20 years. And it's funny you mentioned a cover, but the magazine that you're involved with, Life Quote Journal,
yep.
I mean, I know it was shared behind the scenes, but it hasn't been shared yet. But I'm super stoked because I'm going to be on the cover of the May issue, which comes out in a few days. And Maria, who runs the magazine, just sent me the cover just as a proof to see it. And, first of all, it's so flattering to be on the cover of such a cool new magazine. But again, to your point, it reminds me this has been 20 years. And so it's funny how you mentioned a magazine cover, and then this reminds me 20 years. And the reason it does is because my cover story talks about my journey. And so it talks about me starting as a speaker 20 years ago. Having said that, one of the things that Maria does, which is a little different than other magazines, which I like, is she got me to write the story. Usually when you're in a cover story, somebody else writes a story about you. So for me,
Right.
it's good because it dug up some things that from the past that it's always good to bring back to the surface and remember what you went through and all that kind of stuff. So that was pretty
Mhm.
exciting. But yeah, it's a reminder that, wow, 20 years and 10 years, long time in the speaking business. So having
Yes.
said that, the only other things I wanted to say just to kick things off is I mentioned this yesterday, but just for those that didn't tune in yesterday or didn't see me say it yesterday or on the replay, we are launching book number 4. I mean, if it wasn't for this event, doing this event every half day, it would probably be already have launched maybe Friday or Monday morning. But we are
Mhm.
there. Like Kelly is helping me with the launch, and she has the website up for pre-orders. Like it's there right now. It's ready. The book's done. The website's up. So Blue Talks number 4 book is ready. We're working on number 5 and 6 pretty much at this time as well. So lots of stuff happening for those that haven't seen the covers before. Here's the books 1,
Thank
2,
you.
3, and number 4 has the chakras on it. And the other thing I thought I would share is, of course, if you're watching this and you think of somebody else that could use this, even if you don't, you never know who could use this. But feel free to share. I always say sharing is caring, and I know that's cheesy, but it's true. I mean, there's times that people have shared stuff that's changed my life, and they wouldn't
Mhm.
have ever known if they hadn't shared it. Usually I'll go out and tell them that thank you for sharing that. That made a big impact. Or we see it often where we'll post something and somebody said, thanks so much. I needed to hear that today. Same thing. You never know when you share this, who needs to hear what. So, I'd love for you to share, love for you to comment. As people know who watch us regularly, if you comment or share, that's your best way to get in for the contests. We actually did the recent event about a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, and we're just about to do the draw for those books. So I like to give away books. I mean, to me, that's all about learning. And so if you comment and you share, that's how you get in for the draws. Only other thing I want to say, and then we're going to jump right in and bring our first guest on, is that you may or may not have seen, but I launched the Influencer Vault this week. This is something that's been in the works for 2 years behind the scenes. I'm super pumped to finally be here. I've been talking about it as a member site, which I think I got to get away from because so many people are involved in so many member sites. I think when you say a member site, people think, oh, I don't have time for another member site. And it's so much bigger than that, as you know, Kelly. I mean, it's a resource portal where we're sharing speaking opportunities to write, opportunities to be interviewed. Kelly, you got in the Life Coach Journal after I connected you with the publisher. That's an example right there. And we have about 45 people, I think, within our Blue Talks community that write for magazines right now based on these connections. So it's an opportunity to get speaking, writing, and interview opportunities. It's an opportunity to learn from the best of the best. So upcoming, and I just shared this with somebody today, our schedule, it kind of blows my mind, but coming up just in the next couple of months, we have Les Brown coming on live, Bob Proctor, who else do we have? Jesse Ecker, which would be the T. Harv Ecker brand, yep. And Stedman Graham is coming up as well. And so we have these amazing speakers coming up where you can jump on and ask them questions live and in real time. And somebody said to me today when they saw the list, they said, we need more females on there. And I said, oh, but wait, there's more. Because the interesting part, it wasn't intentional, but the males grabbed the first 2 months of schedule. And then when you go to the next 2 months, it's almost all female. So it's just that I happen to share the schedule for the first 2 months. But yeah, so, I'm super stoked to give people access to some of these speakers they might otherwise never have access to and can ask questions in real time. That's the huge part. They can actually ask their own questions.
The amazing part when you actually get to ask questions in real time. That's incredible.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about this. And then the last part is we're going to be doing monthly trainings as well for people. And Kelly, I know we're talking about bringing you on to do some author training. So
perfect. Would love that.
Okay, there you go. Keep your eye out for the Influencer Vault. So I just want to mention that's a monthly member site / resource community we just launched. So having said all that, that's all our housekeeping out of the way. As we said, sharing is caring. Feel free to share, comment, all that kind of great stuff. And now, without further ado, let's bring our first guest on and make some magic happen. So Maggie, so excited to have you here today. And Maggie, welcome. And I'll tell you, the first thing we typically do is we bring our guests on and ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves rather than us trying to read from a sheet. I always feel it's better to talk to the person themselves. So Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome to Blue Talks?
Good morning, Corey and Kelly. It's so nice to be here. I appreciate the invite. A little bit about me would be, let me just tell you, people know me, as you can see, as a relationship coach. And my background is as a social worker. So it fits right in from where I left as a social worker and started a career as a coach. And my focus has been mostly to advocate for women in domestic violence as a survivor myself. So my book was a story about my journey. So I use my own life experience to coach women who are looking to find not just their compatible partner, but also to identify their true self and who they are. Because only through that we're able to find a compatible partner when we do know who we are and what we have to offer. And because relationships are so difficult. So I focus on that. And of course, I'm a mother and a wife. And just at this time, just enjoying the journey of coaching others.
Wow, I love it. And so, one of the things I want to ask you in regards to this, Maggie, is when it comes to relationships, and I believe we chatted about this last time we talked, but I want to ask you, what do you feel or what do you find is the most common thing that people run into in terms of having relationship challenges? Like, what's the most common thing that seems to come up over and over again among people that seem to struggle with relationships?
I think one of the challenges, I know last time we met, we spoke about, I talked about communication, which is something that we all know is very challenging when it comes to relationship. But I think one of the things that I also would like to add to that is the fact that we have a vision of what the person that we fall in love is, and then we have to live with the reality of who that person is. And that's the challenge in relationships when we set expectations, which is something that I encourage my clients not to do, but it's hard as human being because when you meet someone, the minute you start the conversation, you have this thing in your head that starts telling you all those great things, and you only pick up of the vibes that are positive and that resonate with what you actually want. So therefore, you start creating your own story, and reality sinks in once you and that person actually become closer than just friends, and you're spending time with that person and realize, wow, what I had in my mind and what the person really is, they're different. How do we reconcile with that? And I think that challenge itself creates a big barriers in relationships when people say, well, I'm not in love with you, because they are in love with who they created in their mind. So expectation is something that we need to address when it comes to relationships, and how to avoid it in order for us not to be disappointed.
I love how you bring that up, because that's such a great point. I feel like that even translates over to business as well. Meaning, I feel like sometimes we start working with a client or a business partner or a supplier, and we build up this idea in our mind of how they operate or who they are. And then whenever it comes out that that's not exactly who they are, then all of a sudden that's when communication troubles happen. That's when the relationship breaks down. And so I guess, do you think is there a value in shaking that idea off from the start about what we think the person is, or is there a value in coming into it saying, I can't change people, and people are going to always be changing from what I think originally? Like, what do you feel like is the some of the strategies people can have before they maybe even get into the relationships for this idea of making expectations or assumptions about who a person is?
I think one of the things that is very important is for us to work on ourselves, basically. If you understand who you are and what is it that you would like to have in a relationship. When I say who you are, and I know a lot of people, when we talk, well, we're going to practice self-love, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to do certain things to practice self-love. But self-love is deeper than just meditation, because we have to go really deep in trying to understand who's that little child in us who grew up to be this adult. Because sometimes the baggage that we carry are not just from our adult stage, but from the beginning when we were kids. So once we understand who we are, with that focus in mind, it led us to a compatible partner. And that's alone create an easier relationship for you, because you have someone that has the same vision as you. The idea of expectation is because we want to do things a certain way. So the challenge is, when you are in a relationship with someone, it's not how you go to get to the destination, it's the fact that you guys can get to that same destination. And if we can understand that, it will definitely eliminate a lot of conflict in relationships. So that's one of the things that I work with my clients in. And that's when we try to change the person. It's not because we're not compatible. It's not because the end vision is not the same. It's because we chose different paths to get to where we want to be.
Yeah, I love that, because I do feel you see relationships break down where, as you said about changing, people aren't happy with, again, because they had a different expectation, they aren't happy with what it looks like now, or what they feel the person looks like now, and the first thing they try to do is change them. And some people, it seems like, will be married for 15 years trying to change a person without finally realizing you can't change another person, in my opinion. They have to want to change, or like you said, you can change yourself. As Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Change yourself and see if that person keeps up and evolves as well. But if a person perpetually has always done something their whole life for 30 years, the idea that you're going to be able to change them in a month to your liking, first of all, isn't going to work. And secondly, I think it's not going to be aligned anyway, because they don't want to be changed to that person. And so they're not going to be happy. And I feel like, to your point, I think we have to be the one that makes the changes. And also at the same time, be willing to be flexible about what we think the destination should look like and all that kind of stuff too. So I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, definitely. I think if we, once you meet someone and you find, okay, well, this is a compatible partner, someone with whom I can have a future with, it's a very good idea actually to put everything on the table, and not just how you do everything, like when you wake up and all the little details, but actually the big picture, the end results. And if you guys agree with that, then you can work on the little details. But I think often also one of the challenges that we have is that we fail to understand that throughout our journey, we have to encounter different people and learn different things from these people. And some people come in your life for a reason and a season, and to teach you something. And when their time is over, it's okay to let go and release and move on. And people have a hard time in releasing and letting go, because they're trying so hard. Well, it's something wrong with me. If I failed in this relationship, people are going to talk bad about me. But that has nothing to do with failing. Sometimes it's just the time is over and it's okay. Acceptance is something we need to work on.
Yeah, I so agree. And I feel like, and I know this is a hard one, especially in a relationship, but I feel like detachment is another one too. To be able to detach from the outcome or detach from, and of course, it's never going to be easy. I mean, I don't think with emotions is ever easy. But if we can start learning to detach from always expecting a certain outcome and only being happy if we get the outcome, it'll make it easier if it doesn't work out down the road. But I mean, I think that's another thing. Like it's you have to do the work. It sounds strange, but you think letting go would just be as simple as letting go. But I mean, we've been conditioned to hold on and to fight for this thing forever. So the idea of being detached from an outcome is really foreign to us. So yeah, I think it's kind of ironic. Kelly, I want to let you jump in. I've been stealing all the time here, so I want to let you jump in with any questions you might have.
No, it's okay. I'm enjoying the conversation. Well, I'm single, and so relationships is a big issue. And it was funny because yesterday I was having a conversation with one of my best friends about that very issue. It's like, do I want to be in a relationship? Do I not want to be? And I think sometimes when we get older, that's a big question. We're programmed that we're supposed to be with somebody, but yet how do you make that work so that you're both happy? And I was even telling her, like, that's one of the reasons I love long distance relationships, because then I have my space when I need it, and they have their space when they need it. But when we're together, and that kind of thing works for me. It doesn't always work for other people. And then I was in a relationship last summer, and it was just weird that here I am trying to include this man into my life who now want to be my best friend, and I've only known him for like a few weeks, and yet I have my real best friends who I've known for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And how do you make that work? And ultimately I couldn't make it work because it just wasn't right for me. So yeah, I'm always trying to figure out, what do I really want, right?
Yeah. Good.
That's another point too, Kelly. The what do I really want is another important point, because you need to know what your ultimate goal is and what you want out of a person and in life, I think, as well, when you go into it. And to your point, both of your points actually, even now, like, I've been in my relationship with my girlfriend for 6 years. It's funny because I still say girlfriend, but she says husband now. Everybody says your husband. They say to me your wife, and I don't correct them. But it's just funny how I'm still used to saying that. But we have 2 kids together. We've been together, as I said, over 6 years now, over 6 years, just in March. And I have to say, I feel, and her and I haven't really fully dived into this, but I feel like we had to actually kind of get to know each other in a different way through COVID, because as a speaker, somebody like myself as a speaker, I was on the road upwards of 300 days some years. So to your point, Kelly, I mean, we had like the starts and stops where, like, you get away and then of course you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to see you again because I've been away for a month. And it's just like, I think like a musician, I always picture a rock star that's on the road, or any type of artist who's on the road. And then they come home for 1 week a year or a month a year. Well, of course they get along great because they're so excited to see each other, and they don't have time to really get into the fight part. They're just in that hot emotion type part. And so it's funny because I feel like we had to sort of not start over, but it was just, we had to adjust to a different lifestyle where I'm always home. And that's on both sides, right? Because now I'm always there. I'm always there. When you have that extra person there, there's extra things that person might do. Like they might forget to put down the toilet seat, or they might forget to take out the garbage, and you would have taken it out, but now you're thinking they will. And there's just small things that all, you have to factor all that in. So, Kelly, I know when you said that about long distance relationships, it is something to consider, because when you're always there with the person, you're always there with the person. And I think that's, some parents said they realized now they know their kids. They didn't know what it was like. They didn't raise their kids like, and I don't mean that in a negative way, just meaning like the kids were at school and everything. They didn't know what it was like to ever be with their kids 24/7 until now. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, we got to get to know each other. And interestingly, Maggie, and I mean, that's a segue to ask you, I'm thinking a lot of things must have come full circle now for people? Like when you're dealing with relationships, a lot of things must have changed for a lot of people with COVID. Am I safe in saying that?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And some for the better and some for the worse. Because once you start living with someone on a daily basis, that's when you really get to know that person. And when you're traveling and you're not home all the time and you're working away from home, when you come home, the little moments that we have together, they're enjoyable. We want to have fun, want to go out to dinner and stuff like that. But when you're living with someone and you're seeing that person every single day, yeah, even leaving the toilet seat out, can be, annoying. And that's when I think we are being tested. This is a very peculiar time, I should say, because COVID has changed us in a way that I don't think anyone expected it to happen. Living with someone that you say a husband, sometimes for years, sometimes we don't even know that person because he or she is not there. But with COVID, we are present with each other. We have to be there. And often what is missing in relationships, what I hear, I've listened a lot from my clients telling me, well, I don't feel like my husband sees me, or I don't feel like my boyfriend sees me, It's like we talk, but he doesn't understand what I'm saying. He's not present. And COVID make it easy for people to be present and for us to understand or to acknowledge, is that person really present in the relationship? Are they just there physically and not there emotionally? So these are the things that we have been dealing with when it comes to COVID that either bring people closer or separate them, because now they have to see each other for who they really are, not what they just imagine they are.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess I'd ask you as well, how do you feel, Maggie, if we switch to business for a minute or two, how do you feel this affects their business life? Because obviously, this just doesn't just affect a person's personal life. If it's a business owner, for instance, and like my case, where they're home a lot more and their expectations change and things change, do you feel this carries over into everything else they do as well?
Yes, I do. I think that's when we're gonna identify maturity versus a child, really, because sometimes we go into relationships and we again have expectations and the idea of who the person is, but once you have to step up and show you who you really are, it sets you apart from someone who doesn't know what they're doing and someone who's mature enough. And that's when you can define, okay, well, is this the relationship that I really want? Because this is who that person really is. Again, if someone show you who they are, it is who they are. So maturity has a lot to do with it. If you're someone who's responsible and who will create also a pattern in your life of the things you want to do, and you set your life in a way that regardless of who comes in and out of your life does not really change your routine. Yes, you can make some compromising. However, that person understands this is who you are, and vice versa. In my relationship, I can use that as an example. Both me and my husband, we work at home. And often people say, how do you do this? You're both at home, you see each other all the time. But we understand that we are two different persons. We wake up and he has his own space, he goes to his office, and I wake up and I have my own space. And then we meet for lunch if we have time, but we always make time for dinner. Which is very important. So just like if we both were leaving the house, we would make sure that we are at home in the evening together. And we talk, we ask each other, which is one of the first things that when I remember when I met my husband and he asked me, what is it that you want? And it was very simple for me. And I said, I want someone to say to me, how was your day? And we kept that routine throughout the whole, it's been almost 13 years now, our relationship, asking each other, how was your day? It's important for us to keep the little routine and not to forget them, because one of the reason also people do walk away from relationships is because they forget what it was like. They forgot what brought them together. And if we can remember these things, and I often suggest to my clients, renew your vows, take a vacation, make time for the other person. And I have a list of great things that I encourage them to do to make sure that you keep the romance alive, to make sure that you see the other person. because we are very affectionate beings. We want to be touched, we want to be seen, we want to be heard. We want to feel that we are important, that we are respected, that we matter. And that's the other partner's job to provide that for us. And that's also our job to provide that for the other partner.
Yeah, I love that. And so, Kelly, again, before I jump in with another question, just wanted to pass it back over to you to see any other questions you might have for Maggie.
Well, you know, I don't know what to say. No, I just think it's important, like you say, is to have that space, right? Because, you know, I mean, I'm a big believer in the love languages, the 5 love languages, but I also read an article that there's a 6th love language, which is distance, which is space, and it's where you give your partner that space that they need to grow or to get stuff done that they need to do, or, you know, just to have their own, you know, develop their own life. And I know that that's one of the things that scares me when I get into a guy that I'm dating or something. It's like, oh my gosh, like, do I really want this, right? How am I going to integrate someone into my life, right? Because I love being able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, you know? So it's like, how do you integrate? So.
Yeah, well, Kelly, I understand often when someone's been single for a long time, it's kind of hard for you to say, okay, well, how do I bring someone in my own space? Because this is all mine. Now, bringing somebody, that means I'm going to be sharing, and that person's going to be in my life into everything that I do, and I'm not used to that. First of all, if you are comfortable with yourself and knowing, okay, you know what? I know who I am, and I know what I have to offer. And when I say have to offer, you have to tell yourself and understand, why am I bringing someone else into my life? What is that person's going to do in my life? What is that person's role in my life? So if you cannot identify that, it's not a good time to bring anyone in your life. But if you understand why you need someone in your life, often that need is really not so important, because once it's met, the relationship is broken. For instance, if you meet someone and you say, well, okay, I have a financial need and I need someone to help me financially. Yeah. Once you're okay financially, the relationship often just, you know, dissolve, because you no longer have that need. So if you understand why you want it, is it companionship that you want for long, you know, the rest of your life, and you want to travel with this person and enjoy the journey with that person, then you'll be surprised that you will make space and accommodate that person, because your needs are going to be fulfilled. Yeah. You remember, relationship is give and take. It's not just about one person. So just ask yourself, what is it that I'm looking for? Why would I want someone in my life? What are the things that somebody can bring to make me not feel complete, you know, but to complement you, you know? And if you don't understand what that is, and I would suggest that you try to identify, what does that person looks like? What does that person looks like? Physically, it's important, but also in every aspect of your own personal life. What is it that you have to offer and that you would like to have in return? See? Because if you understand these things, and unfortunately, we were never taught these things, not in school, nor at home. I remember my parents told me, you need to go to school, finish college, get married, and have kids. That was it. Yep. No one told me that relationships can be challenging. And I had to learn the hard way. Earlier, I mentioned that I'm an advocate for domestic violence, because I'm a survivor of 2 different types of relationships. And through these experiences that I was able to find out and ask myself, well, hold on. Don't rush. I need to know me, because we need to know what is it that attract these type of people that we've been in relationships with, which is perhaps one thing that I would suggest to you, Kelly, because if you're not in a relationship right now, obviously something happened. So understanding what happened can get you better prepared for the next one. And also trying to identify, what is it that you have to offer? What are you going to bring into the relationship? Because we bring baggages in our relationships. I have a program that's called a table analogy, where I focus on the things that we bring, or baggages that we bring into our relationships. And if you can understand that, then it would be easier to just lay them on the table when you guys first meet, you know. You don't need to wait on the second date to talk about these things. The very first date. I remember I did the same. What I'm telling you, that's exactly what I did. I told my husband on the first date that I wanted to be married. And he told me he was very unhappy in his marriage. He was getting a divorce and he did not want to get married again. I said, okay, then we'll be friends. And when he tried to change the relationships, I was like, no, you said you want a friend and I want a husband. We're not on the same path. And 4 weeks later, you realize that the only way for him to be with me in our relationship was for him to become my husband. And he proposed. And we had our first kiss. So it's something that is possible. I've done it, and we all can do it. We just have to know what we want and ask for it without any regret or embarrassment of what you want to get out of any relationship.
Amazing.
Very true.
So, Maggie, I want to shift gears in another direction now, but I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. And so I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. One thing we talked about yesterday, and I realized I don't ask enough authors about this, so I want to start making this something I ask, but it's about the writing process. So when you were writing your book, what type of writing process do you follow? And what I mean by that, is, do you, like we talked yesterday, some people say they channel and they basically just sit down and the words come out. Some people say they sit down for 30 minutes a day. Some people have an outline, some people don't. So I'm just wondering what the writing process looked like for you.
Well, for me, I knew that I wanted to write a book when I was very young because I always felt that I had a story to share. But like many people, you know, the book was just inside of me and in my journal and in my drawer. When I decided to write this book was while I was leaving a convention. I don't know if I mentioned that to you in the last meeting. I was leaving the convention with Lisa Nichols, and I told my roommate, I said, oh my gosh, something paranormal just happened to me. I felt different than the time that I walked in and now that I'm leaving. And she said she felt the same way too. And when we got downstairs meeting in the lobby, and it was like I was asking the other women, and I'm like, wow, this is strange. And I knew at that moment that I needed to share that story. And there was nothing that's going to hold me back anymore. But the process itself of writing the book was, I would wake up in the middle of the night, which is what I used to do. I wake up early in the morning, and that's when I guess I just have everything just pouring out of me. And I would just write until my fingers just hurt. I don't read what I write. I just write and write and write until I was tired. I put the book down and I go back to sleep. And that happened to me throughout the whole process of my journey, of my writing the book. But I also had a coach that was really good with me as far as telling me where to focus, and knowing that in my head, that directed me to pull out everything in each area that I wanted to write on the book. Yeah.
It's interesting. I talked yesterday about how when you mentioned about writing almost till your fingers hurt every day, and it makes me think of, I talked yesterday about Sylvester Stallone when he wrote Rocky, and how he shared the story that he basically started writing on a Friday, Friday after watching, I think it was a fight. I feel like he watched, it was a Muhammad Ali fight, I believe, but he watched a fight, he got inspired, and he started writing, and he wrote for, I forget what it was, but basically 3 days straight, and wrote the entire movie, Rocky. And so we were talking about this yesterday. Some people sit down and write and they just can't stop, and it just keeps coming out every day. And then other people have to have a structure behind it. So yeah, so I just want to hear how it worked for you, because for me, it's interesting to see the differences. And every now and then you come up with some little nugget of something that somebody's doing totally different than everybody. And so the other question I want to ask you about the book then, Maggie, is it became a bestseller. And so I want to ask you, how much, if at all, I don't want to make assumptions, but how much did that impact your business, having a best-selling book? Like, it's part of your bio, probably, it's on your website. Do you feel it's helped with credibility? It's brought on more clients? Like, what can you kind of look to and say, this is what happened after writing a book?
For me, I think it had a lot to do with self-value, number one. I always believe that if I'm going to teach something or talk about something, I have to know what I'm going to talk about. And being an author made me feel, okay, well, now not only I know my story, but I have shared my story. And people know who I am because of the story that I've shared. And I think that's what it did for me. As far as bringing me business and increase my business, I think most of it came from when I was doing my tour, because I would meet that's how I got most of my clients. When I would do a tour and I would read some chapters of my book. And actually that's how the whole business changed, from me coaching just people about relationships, and then people wanting to become coaches. It was in that moment that I met people asking me, how did you do this? How did you change from one career to the next? Because this is my third career. And how did you grow this business? And they wanted to know. And so it was very easy for me to just grow another business within my business. And that's what happened. Yes. And I think it has a lot to do with the book, because if I didn't have the book, I wouldn't be doing the tour and I wouldn't be talking to these people probably. Yes.
And then you mentioned Lisa Nichols, and I know we met at her event, I believe. I'm trying to remember if that's where we met or on her page. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think we both were with her in San Diego, but we didn't meet in San Diego. We met, probably on the page.
Yeah, and I feel like San Diego, I think I saw you speak there. I think you went on the sage, right? So
yes. Yeah,
I saw you speak, but I didn't know who you were at the time.
Yeah, I think that we had a group that were we were preparing our story to share, and I went up as a group. Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like I probably saw you there without realizing I saw you there. Synchronicity, of course. And but what I wanted to ask you about that, because that's something we don't talk about often as well, Kelly, is the power of events, going to events in terms of growing your business. And so how big a part has that played for you? Like, did you have the book when you went to Lisa's last event? And if so, did that help? Like, did you talk to people and they say, oh, what do you do? And you say, oh, I help people with relationships and I wrote this book or what have you. I'm just curious, how big a part do you think going to events like that has helped your business as well?
I think it helped me in collaborating with other people. I've met some amazing people throughout those conventions that I attended. I am by nature a very introvert person. And I think watching other people going on stage and talking kind of just helped me to say, okay, well, I can do this too. And having the support of a tribe, I think makes a big difference. I remember the first time I had to post a video about my story on the group, I remember I cried. I actually wrote about that on the book. I cried because I did not want to share my story. Although I wanted to share the story, but I was like, it was very hard for me to do it. And knowing I had a particular colleague that was there with me throughout the whole time, that, she'll call me and make me feel better and talk with me and guide me through, this is what she said we need to do. Just follow what you have to do. Don't worry about it. We're going to love and support you. And when I was finally able to hit the post, and I remember it was late at night and I'm on the phone with her and I said, I just did it. And she says, congratulations. And then I got nothing but love from everybody else after that. And it made me feel good knowing, oh my gosh, no one is really criticizing me. My story is ugly, but nobody's, talking about that. Everybody's telling me how brave I am for talking about it, for letting people know that they can have a voice, which in turn, all these things give me to a space where right now I have a community that I'm building to give people a space where they can own their own story, share your story so somebody else doesn't have to go to the same journey that you went through to learn. So yeah, I do believe in community and in building your tribe. And yes, it does help. It makes a big difference.
Well, I love what you shared there. And I have two last quick questions for you, but I love what you shared there. And one of the things that I don't know if I said it years ago, and I don't know if it's mine or not. I mean, the quote's hard. Like, I can't take credit for it because I may have heard it somewhere and not remembering having heard it. But the quote I've shared a number of times is, they don't erect statues for critics. And so when you talked about putting that quote there and you didn't have a whole lot of criticism, I always think when I'm doing something like that, because it is hard to press, as you said, press post, I always think of it that fact that the people that have changed the world are never the critics. The people that go on there and say, this is horrible, you shouldn't have done that, what have you. It's always the people that were brave enough to press post. You think about artists like the Beatles, who, I would say impacted a lot of lives. It started because they went out and played in clubs. But the critics that were saying, oh, they're horrible, they'll never make it and all that stuff, they weren't changing lives. They weren't making a difference. And I don't mean that in a negative way to a critic, because there's a role for everybody. But I just mean that's what I always think of whenever I'm nervous about pressing post, and whatever that term is, right, about pressing print or raising my voice, is I always think about the fact that the people that are changing the world are the ones that are bold enough to put that out there, even though they know they could face criticism. So I'm glad you did that.
Yes.
And so I said I had two quick questions. One is going to be, I'll give you a hint, it's going to be, how can we learn more? So that's a basic question. But one question I try to ask everybody is the time machine question, I call it. So time machine question is, if you could jump into a time machine and go back and talk to a younger Maggie and give her one piece of life advice based on what you've learned in the year since, what do you think you might tell younger Maggie?
This is a question, funny, that I've been asking myself lately, and that I've shared with my sisters and my kids. Start your own business as early as you can. We need to learn to make our money work for us instead of working to make money. And if you follow your passion, you will most likely have everything you want in life. And I would not discourage anyone to go to college and be educated. But if you're going to do anything in life, find out what your passion is and then follow it. So that's what I would tell the younger Maggie. What was your passion when you were younger? And it's okay that it took so long for you to find it. The fact is, you're changing lives. But I would have said, well, it would have been nice if you had learned this earlier.
Love that. So Maggie, the last official question, really the only official question, is how can we learn more? So you shared so much great insight. If somebody wanted, if they're struggling with their relationship, if they want that community to be able to share without people criticizing them, whatever they're looking for in relation to what you shared today, is there a hub or a place you would send them?
Definitely. First, I would encourage you guys to read my book, Owning My Destiny. It has so many great insight on it throughout my journey and the things that you can use in your own personal life. So you too can find your compatible partner, your Adam, as I call my husband. But it's very easy to reach out to me. I am on social media. My website is www.owningmydestiny, as you can see behind me, .com. And I am on Facebook Live every Thursday night at 9 p.m. And our program is really to educate the community. We talk mostly about relationships, and we honor different events that are happening throughout the month. And we bring in different guests on the panels, experts to talk to the community. And we get the people on Facebook Live very involved to comment. They can actually call me if they want while we're live on WhatsApp. I have my number posted on the Facebook, which is My Relationship Guru official Facebook page. And people also can go into my personal page, which is Maggie Kanzki, my name. And I have an Instagram, Coach Maggie Kanzki. So there's so many ways to reach out to me. And I'm also part of Clubhouse. So find me there and just reach out to me, ask me any questions. As you can see, I am not shy I may be introvert, but not shy in answering your questions.
I love it. And thank you so much, Maggie. This has been an absolute pleasure. Kelly, just before Maggie runs, anything else you want to add or any questions or anything just before we bring things?
I'm adding her on Clubhouse. That's what I'm doing. So I got to find her on Clubhouse.
Awesome stuff. No, that's perfect. So Maggie, like I say, an absolute pleasure. I'm going to wave the flag for all the great things you're doing. I thank you so much. I'd love to call it a to be continued so we can look to bring you back on in the future. And I just want to thank you for being so gracious with your insight today.
It's my pleasure. I hope someone can get something from it. And if you do, please share it, like Corey says, share the videos, because the more you share, the more people you help, basically. So yes.
So agree. So agree. So awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Maggie. So appreciate you. We'll let you run. And again, we'll look at it as a to be continued.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the space.
Thank you. Awesome stuff. Amazing stuff. So Kelly, hopefully that was valuable to you. I know it really was to me. And I've been in a relationship, as I mentioned, 6 years. So on the relationship side, it was valuable. And then, of course, talking about her experience on the book side, I think is quite valuable as well. So that was awesome. And one thing I was going to mention, I was going to ask you, Kelly, I don't know if you're involved in this just before we bring our next guest on. Did you sign up for the Be on TV boot camp? You know what I'm talking about?
Be on TV boot camp? No, I didn't even know about it.
Okay. I was thinking the way
What's that about? And who is it with?
So the names are, I think it's Jen. I'm going to pronounce her name.
Oh, Jen Getfried and Chris Whitfield.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I did a 5-day challenge that they did, like when they first did it. But no, I haven't done that Be on TV boot camp. But I should. Are you doing it?
Well, yeah. So I just asked because, and I bring this up obviously for a reason related to what we're talking about this week, influence and getting your message out there. Now, I'm going to be full disclosure. I haven't dived in yet, so I can't speak for what my experience will be. But I joined, and I've been seeing the comments like crazy. You know, when you join a new group, like comments are coming in, so I see notifications, and I'm blown away by how many people that I know that are that are posting. Because what happens is everybody, when they go in, they post their video and say, here's who I am. And actually one of our guests today, I think Chris Gordon, who's coming up, I think he's in it. Another person that just joined our Influencer Vault is in it. And it's amazing. Like, I'm seeing all kinds of people I know in there. So I didn't know if you were in this one. I think there's like 2,000 people in this round. And anyway, it's something that people should look at. Even like this time, they're already going, like they're 3 days in. So I don't know that they're probably closed for joining right now. But if you hear of this next time, I would check it out, because what I was going to say is I haven't dived in yet, but every person I know and trust that's in there is going on about how amazing it is. And you did their challenge before. It seems like they're the real deal. And it was very low cost. I'm going by memory. I've upped to the VIP, but I think it was still only $250 US or 200 US. I mean, to get on TV and get insight from people that are doing it on a daily basis for $200 and some to me is pretty good value. I haven't dived in because their event all week, all 5 days, is running the exact same time as us. And we already had this booked, but it's on Facebook, so you can check out the replays. So I can go back in and watch the replays anyway. So I'm going to try to make time each morning to watch the replay. It's only an hour and a half, so I technically can watch it before us each day, but I haven't jumped in yet. So I just wanted to put that out there for people. If you see that name, it is worth looking into. Probably by the end of this week, I'll be able to give a review. So I just want.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I actually want to get them part of my next event in June. So
that's a good idea.
To be a part of it. Yeah.
I mean, that's also, maybe we should look at either getting them for inside the Influencer Vault or inside here as well. So
yeah, we should have them come speak for the next Amplify Your Message event for sure.
Agreed. So without further ado, and on that note, let's bring on our next guest.
Yeah, let's bring on Travis.
So I believe we know each other, right?
Yeah, I know Travis. You bet.
Yep.
Awesome. Morning, Travis. And Travis, what we've been doing, and I don't know if you saw the last interview at the first of it, but what we've been doing is getting the guests to introduce themselves a little bit before we dive right in. And I love your brand, Men on Fire, because you are a man on fire. Because I'm starting to see your name all over the place. So, Travis, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves before we dive into some Q&A?
Yeah, so I work with men, obviously, and help them find their true success, passion, and purpose in their life. And by doing that, through changing the language that they use with themselves and others, to create the legacy that they want. It's pretty simple, but it's a big platform, right? So, and I do that through coaching and speaking, and it's been really rewarding so far. And
interestingly, now, and I'm going by my own knowledge on this, but interestingly, your backstory is not typically, I don't think, somebody would associate you following this path based on your journey to get there. Is that correct? Like your background previous to this?
Absolutely. I still own a very successful welding business in Alberta, and I'm a true Alberta farm boy. I worked in the oil patch, and I've been had this business for 15 years now, and I'm transitioning out of it. So I've gone from that very masculine kind of environment to what a lot of people don't think is masculine, is coaching and speaking. And honestly, it's not any less masculine. It's just a different way of impacting people.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, it's one of the things that always stood out to me is, your backstory. To your point, like people would say, "Oh, well, I don't see how the two link together," and I completely see that because, well, I should say I completely see it, and also I can see why it makes sense because you're able to reach people that maybe other male coaches couldn't, because you're not coming from that traditional background of, being a speaker and being a coach for your whole career or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I'm sure you've heard this so many times that people say, "Oh, you need to talk to my husband or my son." I mean, anytime you're in this kind of community, you get that a lot, and I hear it all the time. And when I worked in those environments, when I worked in the oil patch years ago, it was a constant process of guys working too much, marriages being torn down, guys being torn down. Like, it's just absolute craziness, and Alberta is a very industrial province, so there's a lot of that goes on a daily basis.
Well, and when I say that, I feel like you could reach people that maybe others couldn't. And it's a weird comparison, but it makes me think of in the wrestling world. For those that watch wrestling or know of the wrestling world, there's a guy named Diamond Dallas Page, and he's a former wrestler who now is a yoga guy. He has DDP yoga. And the people, because I went to one of his yoga classes in New York, and I would say 90% of the class were like big burly men who you'd never think talking about yoga. And he names his stuff after wrestler. Like, he names moves, like his yoga things that we know, like downward dog, he calls it something else. And it's like a wrestler move. But he brings out these guys that would typically, growing up, I would never see doing yoga. And they're in there like talking about downward dog and like they're having conversations about meditation and yoga. And he reached them in a way that I don't think many other people could have. And so that's what I'm meaning when I say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something that I see all the time, because I actually I attribute to, it kind of just fell into place with this coaching, but it's the intimate conversations we have. And in the 15 years that I've had that other business, I've actually never done advertising, but I attribute it to having those intimate conversations with the people on the sites. Like when I go to a job site that I've never been to and I talk to the superintendent, I always say it's 5 or 10 minutes about work, but then it's 20 minutes about what they did this weekend, where they like to go camping, how their family's doing, what do they play hockey with their kids? Do they coach hockey? It's those intimate connections that you make with people, where a lot of guys won't have those conversations. It's just get the business, get the job done, and that's it. And we miss out by not having those conversations. And I've actually had guys come to me during jobs when they're, months at a time. Hey, the first thing, good morning. And they start talking about their kid or what happened that weekend or a problem they had, and they ask for advice. And most guys don't have those conversations.
Yeah, it's so true. And, I was raised by a single mother. My father lived in the same area. I mean, I was 15 minutes away. So it's not like I'm saying he was like, in a different country or different part of the world, or left when I was young or what have you, but they split up when I was young. And I was raised by a single mother. And it's interesting because a lot of people felt like I needed to add more male energy into my life simply because I was raised by my mother. And yet I kind of looked at it that my mother kind of played both roles and sort of gave me that masculine energy as well. But the one gift I think she gave me was the ability to share how I'm feeling and share my emotions, and a lot of the things that a lot of my male counterparts don't do. And, so those conversations you're talking about, I've always had them, but I won't say that my male friends always had them. Like, they wouldn't have the conversation with me. I had a lot of male and female friends, but it was like my female friends that I'd have those conversations with, because the male friends didn't have them. So I'm glad to see that changing. And let me ask you this. Do you feel in general that's changing? And the reason I ask you that is we see so much now with, male fathers, for instance, that are out walking the baby with the stroller down the street. and maybe holding the hand of the other child. And you, like, honestly, when I was growing up, I don't remember seeing that almost ever. Now I see that like 5 times a day. Do you feel, Travis, we're moving more in that direction where we're open to talking about how we feel? We realize the importance of not just being the masculine man type dude guy. Do you feel that's changing?
I think that it's really depends on the community and the kind of, it depends what you work in, the field you work in. A lot of it, because a lot of times guys define themselves by what they do, right? And they get stuck in that kind of mentality of what they do. And I do have some guys that are really connected, but I really find that a lot of the guys I know still don't have conversations. I mean, a lot of the dads, depending on what professions they're in or what kind of stuff they do, I don't know. It's a really wide variety. It really depends where you are and who you associate with. And if you don't associate with those people that have conversations like that, you're probably not going to have those conversations. And that is, I find that some guys I have a lot of guys that friends that are in the trades, and they're like, I never expected to have this conversation with you. And because, I had a buddy that came up from Calgary one time, and we were just talking about work. He was buying some stuff off of me. And before he left, I said, "Oh, what's going on?" He says, "Oh, I think our relationship's done." And I'm like, "What? You guys have been together for like 10 years. And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what's going on, Dave? Like, what's happening?" And he said, "Well," I said, what kind of books do you read?" And he goes, "I don't read books." Picture a bald-headed tattooed guy. He's like, "I don't read books." I'm like, "What do you mean you don't read books?" "Yeah, dude." And I sent him home with 2 copies of the 5 love languages. He got a half an hour down the road and phoned me back and said, "Dude, you're not going to believe this. My wife has already read this book and she wants to read it with me together. I think you just saved my marriage." Most guys don't have those conversations, and it's still a thing. It's still, I don't know why it's such a hard concept to grasp that you should read books and have conversations. And most guys will have the conversations when their buddy is hurt or laying on the ground or there's an emergency. That's when people get in touch with their feelings. And that's unfortunately the wrong way to look at it, because when it comes to, when I was in that industry, when I was in the trades, people would call me for when there was catastrophic failure on a piece of equipment instead of doing maintenance. And we are the same way. When you get to the point of catastrophic failure, that is the wrong time to be talking to somebody. You should be doing maintenance all along.
Yeah. So
I love that, Travis, because I have twin boys. I have a daughter, 21, and I have twin boys that just turned 18. And I found out through my mom that my ex-husband has always taught my boys that men don't cry. And I had no idea that my boys actually believed that, because, I've seen them cry, right? I've seen them be open with me, and I've seen them tell me some of their deepest secrets. And so I've always seen them be open with me, but yet they were taught that men aren't supposed to cry. And here they are, they're 18 years old. So we're still teaching the generation that it's not okay to be open. So
yeah, that's a very backwards mentality, because there's so much going on these days that you really want to know what's happening in their life. Because when something happens and you're in the dark, then you're really in the dark. You're like, I had no idea. And how many people do we hear? Well, their children are having one of the biggest things that I face with my teenagers is their friends have gender profiles, gender choices that they're making. They want to be called a certain name, or they're changing their name. And if you're not in the loop with that and you call somebody by the wrong name, or you don't address them properly, you're like, oh no. And it was an issue. And I had to really have those conversations with my kids and, with people, right?
Yeah, I know. And I love that they're actually able to be open with me and share what's happening, right? Like, I think that's so important that they are willing to do that with me. But I was confused because I thought, well, maybe I was confused when my mom told me that, because I thought they were still being open with their dad too. But it sounds like they're not. They feel safe telling me because they know that they're not going to be judged.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mentioned being raised by a single mother, and that's one of the things I think that was beneficial too, is, I never heard those words, "men don't cry." I mean, I'm sure there's times hanging around with my friends that some of my buddies said that, but it didn't compute. And maybe because my mother was my biggest influence, I never thought that way. Now, admitting that or saying that, I haven't cried as much as my life as I should have, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm sure there's lots of times I held it in and just didn't even acknowledge it. But I mean, when I went to funerals of my grandmother and stuff like that, there were like a lot of the older men, you could tell they were just fighting it. Like, I'm not going to cry, and I'm not even thinking about crying. And, you know, I was like 9 or 10 or 12, and I was bawling my eyes out. And my mother never said stop that, or later on said anything. And even my grandfather, who played a part in it, never said that, because he didn't show his emotions a lot, but he also felt you should. Like, he didn't show them a lot, but he didn't say you shouldn't show them. And he, you know, I knew how he felt and stuff. But having said that, you know, as you said, Travis, it still exists in a lot of places. And I want to switch gears just for a second, which is still related to this, but I want to ask your thoughts around COVID and what's happened for you there. Are you doing a lot of virtual summits and events and stuff like that? And if so, I guess the bigger question out of that is, how has COVID impacted you and impacted your business? Like, has it taken it in the wrong direction? Have you had to pivot? I'm just curious how COVID has impacted you. And then, are you doing a lot of virtual speaking now?
Pretty much everything we're doing is virtual now. We've been doing virtual dinner dates with people, which is, I never thought it would be a thing, but honestly, it's like, I tell people, do a virtual dinner date because you're right in your own house. You don't have to travel. You don't have to go. And it's actually a lot of fun. And we find like we had to cut the date short because we just wanted to keep visiting. But yeah, all events have gone virtual. And I've still got my foot in my other business still. So, and that has actually picked up a lot. And because of the downturn in the economy, you lose a lot of people in the trades. So that has actually kind of ramped up a little bit. But yeah, everything's gone virtual. And we just did a course this weekend that would normally be in person, and it was all virtual as well. So it's had a big impact. And the bigger impact, I think that what it's done is open the door for a lot of people that can't afford to travel, and it connects you. People are realizing just how connected you can be with the technology.
Yeah, and you make a great point there, because the not having to travel part, I feel like there's both sides of that. Like, for example, live speakers, when you're not having to travel, there's a lot of speakers pay for their own travel for talks, and there's a lot of speakers that get paid. But if you're a speaker that paid for your own travel previous to this, and some people didn't get paid like Kelly and I do as a keynote speaker, they got paid if they sold stuff when they went there, or people signed the program. And in that case, they were mostly paying for their own travel to get there too. That's a lot of business expense. And so to your point, and Kelly, I think this was brought up yesterday too, but you're saving the travel expenses. I mean, you actually are lowering your expenses by not having to get on the road and do that. And the virtual—
And you can get more done.
You can get more done, and you can reach more people. You wouldn't have been able to probably pre-COVID, but now everybody's online. And everybody was online, but everybody's doing the virtual thing. So you can now have 5,000 people at an event that would have had maybe 500 online before. So you actually reach more people, and you have no travel expenses. And because there's 5,000 people, you can probably sell more of your product than if you were there in person with 100 people. So it's, for some people, I think it's actually, they're looking at it and saying, wow, I don't know if I want to go back. And so it's interesting you say that it's picked up for you on both sides.
Well, and I've been involved in some speaking summits that I would never have otherwise been involved. I just don't know how you'd organize a global summit. Where do you go for that? You know, like, I had people from Italy on this one summit, in Africa, and there was all kinds of stuff, people from all over the world. And I was like, well, that would not have been an in-person event. And it would have been put online anyway to include all the other people, you know? So there's some things that I've been exposed to, and some doors that have opened that definitely would not have opened as a result. You know, the pandemic has opened some doors, and it's a big transition, because I mean, a lot of people are really used to that in-person intimate feel, and there's nothing like an away event. I mean, you guys know that destination events are amazing to go to. You're engaged 100% emotionally, physically, financially. You're committed. And so for some people, you know, they don't do that. And I've ramped up social media big time. Like, I'm on 2 or 3 platforms now and talking about all the things I talk about. And some of them I've pushed a lot of buttons with a lot of people, and you know what? I'm okay with that. But because everybody's on there now, you have a much bigger audience.
And now I'm finding the same thing too. Like, I did a workshop, or a 3-day live event to coach people to be best-selling authors 2 weeks ago. We had people from Paris, Denmark, London, Africa, Malaysia, the US, Australia, New Zealand. I was like, I never could have reached that kind of, you know, that level of people if I would have been in an in-person event. So it was so cool to see, you know, people all over the world wanting to learn what I have to teach them. That was cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and to that point, and I want to ask you, Travis, I want to circle back to live events, but on that note, something I mentioned earlier is, we launched this influencer vault, and as I was launching it, I've been planning to launch this resource portal, member site / everything else for about 2 years behind the scenes, and people didn't know, and this was pre-COVID, and it's interesting to me that it got delayed, and now it's finally being launched. And I only started booking all the speakers about 3 months ago. And I find it interesting that the speakers we booked, I think the odds of me booking half of those speakers, if we were all still traveling live, would be very slim. Like in our first 2 months, we have Bob Proctor, Stedman Graham, Les Brown. What are the odds we would have them coming on live for an hour? And some, yes, but not all of them, not the amount we've had. And so same idea, like, if this might not exist, in 2 years, if everybody's back live, which I know Les Brown told me, he said right on our interview, I don't know if you were here, Kelly, or not, but he said like he might not get on a plane ever again because he's liking the idea that he can speak in 4 cities in a day. And of course, Les is probably getting paid some of his fee for every one of those talks, so he's probably making more money in a day than he would have if he got on a plane, even if he gets less per talk. But the point is that the odds of getting all of them to come and agree to do that whenever they're all live speaking, it would be a lot harder. So when I look at that objectively, it's probably really helped this because now I'm able to give people access to people they might not have been able to get access to. Having said that, to circle back to what I was going to ask you, Travis, will you go back from your perspective to destination events and live events locally once we can do that safely, or once everybody's agreeing that we're allowed to do that? Will you go back to doing that?
100%. I think there's nothing like some of the processes that you use when you're doing events. There's nothing like standing right in front of somebody and holding your hands out and doing some emotional work. And then I always, one of my big things right now is the 20-second hug, which, after about 3 seconds, it's really awkward. And after about 5 seconds, they're like, okay, is this guy weird? And, after about 10 seconds, they're like, okay, then your brain starts to go in a different direction. But it's something that, right now you look at what's going on right now and people are afraid to even pass by you. It's crazy, but yet everybody wants a hug. Everybody wants some connection. And I talk about that all the time. And I got guys that somebody just told me the other day, and this was a pretty big thing for me. I have a friend who's in the military and he's done 9 tours. And I was sitting with Michelle, my fiance, and we were talking with him. And he said, when my daughter got married a few years ago, he goes, Travis was actually the first guy that gave me a hug. And I could see he was having like a panic attack because his daughter's getting married and he was so emotional and he was like fidgeting and just doing. And when I hugged this guy, he was like, just a deep breath. And he's like, that's the first man that's ever hugged me in my entire life. And I was like, this is an East Coast guy. I'm like, how are you an East Coast guy and you've never been hugged? Like, those are the friendly people in the world. Like, and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's what we're missing. We're missing. So I definitely will go back to those events because I think that's a huge component of, creating connection with people.
Well, and you've probably heard of people talk. I mean, obviously it explains itself when you say it, but I'm sure you've heard of the idea of the heart hug as well. When you're hugging, but you're actually, really, it's like what did you say, 27 second?
20-second.
A 20-second hug. I mean, it's the same thing, but it's just you're holding the person to a level where you're holding heart to heart. And it's funny when you say that because most of the friends of mine that I grew up with, and even friends I still have now, a lot of them I don't think would still be comfortable doing that. But it's funny how many of my female friends, and I see my girlfriend with her friends, they would all do that. Like my friend that introduced me to it, Tiffany, who I talk about often. When I'm visiting her, she's in Alberta actually, and if we hug, she's like, no, hey, don't let go. Like she's like, you're supposed to have and she doesn't say 20 seconds, but I think it's like 15 seconds heart to heart or something. But it's to your point, like it just makes me think of how many men I know that still wouldn't do that. But on the flip side, I have a lot more men that I see in my life now that will say, love you, brother, and would have never said that before. And so to your point, I feel like it's changing in certain areas, and in other areas it's maybe a bit slower to change.
Well, and I think everybody that knows me, that knows that I'm like they know that they're going to get a hug. Like I'm not going to shake your hand. I'm going to give hugs and And I get it all the time when I'm around Michelle's friends, because she coaches women, and it's like, she goes, "Oh, he's a hugger." Oh, and now people are like, "Yeah, I know you hug." So then, and then some people are like, "Well, that's a pretty big hug." Like, holy cow. Like, but why not, right?
Well, and that brings up another good point. And this is just from based on what you're seeing, especially where you work helping people with relationships and work with male and female clients. There's another aspect that gets to that now as well. If we go down a different rabbit hole, is as far as the hug, like taking COVID off the table. The idea of some people are uncomfortable hugging. So what do you think is the etiquette there? For example, like you just said, Michelle said he's a hugger. So do you think in an etiquette, let's say, and I'll use the example of a male and a female, just as an example, because that female may not be comfortable with the male hugging them. Do you think proper etiquette to say, is it okay if I give you a hug, or I'm a hugger, is that okay? Like, do you think it's okay to ask that, or do you think we actually should ask that, or do you think it's okay just to hug? Like, I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I've asked that question a lot because that is a thing. Some people are very, very particular about their space, and some women are very uncomfortable about that because they have been hugged by men and that are toxic, and it's unfortunate and it happens. But the people that have heard me talk about Michelle, how I honor her and love her, and her friends don't even think about it when I give them a hug. It's more than a 3-second hug. And, I'm usually telling them how much I appreciate them or love them or whatever. And how many people don't even get hugged like that by their own partner. So a lot of times I do ask, can I give you a big hug? And I don't know, I've been doing it for years. And when I hug people, I really bring people in. And I find like a lot of the biggest impact I find it had is that people who have a little bit lower self-esteem, there's a lot of women that I know, some of my friends that are bigger ladies that don't get big, and I hug those people like I'm hugging my own kids, and they're like, nobody's hugged me like that before. And I'm like, that is sad. That is so sad, because we're designed for connection. We really are. And when people figure that out, it's
so Travis, is your love language touch?
One of them is touch. Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, you're definitely a love language touch for sure.
So Travis, I'm curious now, if we go back a step then. And by the way, when you mentioned about the connection and how we all want it, but it's sad how many people aren't getting it, it makes me think of when I'm trying to think which one it was, but second TEDx talk, there were 2 people on that stage out of 12 that were talking about addiction that both said the opposite of addiction is connection. And it's weird to me, I never correlated the two, but they said, like, they didn't say the option of not having connection is connection. They said the opposite of addiction is connection. So they commented how, like, most people that are addicted, and they were talking, let's say, a drug of choice, like alcohol, let's say, are lacking connection in their life. But they actually, I think it's, I forget the name of the guy, Gabor, I think is his name. But he's really famous in the addiction world. And I think they got it from him. Like, I think it's from his book or whatever. He says the opposite of addiction is connection. So it's just. Did
you say Gabor?
Yeah, Dr. something Gabor. And I think it's Gabor.
Okay.
I'll look that up myself too to let people know here. But I mean, so it's interesting you say that as far as the opposite. As far as how we're lacking connection. And again, it makes me think about the fact that most of the people I know, and I'm open about this. My girlfriend is 6+ years sober, but she's an addict, and I've been to the meetings with her and stuff. And it's amazing how many people describe the fact that they didn't have connection in their life. Like so, I mean, we don't think of the power of not having connection in your life, how damaging that can be. But again, it's not a surprise to me that most addicts, somebody just put up the name is Gabor Mate, and I'm pronouncing that last part probably wrong. So it's Gabor, like I spelled it, Mate. But yeah, so I mean, it's amazing how many people that I've come across that are addicts that basically all but say, I struggled with connection in my life.
And they're looking for connection. Like they want to escape from their loneliness, and so they're looking for connection. And why do people drink together? They want connection, right? They want to bring their inhibitions down and have more connection. So it is a thing.
I think it's an area we definitely have to work on.
Oh, 100%. And that's again, if we had connection, people wouldn't be addicts. I don't think they would be happy having the people in their life that they are. And now with social media, and I even have friends on Marco Polo, and that's the only way we connect. And because we're not traveling, we have these regular conversations on Marco Polo, and there's some really good conversations there. It's just, embracing the technology, and then those people don't feel so lonely, right?
Absolutely. And, so the other side I wanted to ask you about then is in terms of when you're working with people and and the struggles that they have. Is there a common theme that comes up? Like, is there a common thing? I mean, we just talked one, I guess, is like a lack of connection. But is there a common thing that you see coming up over and over again?
Yeah, you know what? 100%. It's who you talk to, who you associate with, what you read, and if you journal or write things down. I think reading is the biggest one. I read a variety of books. I've been reading a lot of financial books because I do stocks as well, and it's crazy how much stuff what you listen to. I think I've listened to every video you have. Gone through your website, and like, just I remember one week I was just like, listen to all your stuff. I was just going through everything you had, and I've listened to Kelly as well. And when you start to educate yourself differently, it's like a university degree on life. Like, if you go to university and all you do is study engineering for 7 years, 100% you're probably going to be an engineer when you get out. So if you start reading books about people and yourself and personal development and finances, you're probably going to know a lot more. And I always tell guys, there's so many different ways you can get an Audible subscription, get a YouTube subscription, and start downloading stuff because it's free. And I'm probably in the hundreds of books that I've read in the last 2 or 3 years. Every day I'm on podcasts, I'm listening to audibles, I'm listening to videos like we're doing right now. We have more access to information than we ever have. It's like Gary Vee says, the greatest time to be alive, because you have no reason for not succeeding at what you're doing.
So this brings up a really important question I want to dive down then, and I will add on. Yeah, the reading thing, I can honestly say changed my life, because I didn't start reading until age 27. That's when I read my first complete book, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've shared that many times. Think and Grow Rich was the second book. Right now I'm reading, like, I'm almost always reading a book. Right now I'm reading The 11th Insight by James Redfield, who wrote Celestine Prophecy. Yeah. And so I always have a book on the go. I'm also almost finished of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, and for some foolish reason I stopped, moved on to The 11th Insight. So I got to finish it. It's only like probably 20 pages left, and it's a brilliant book. But my question out of all that is, you said read hundreds of books. Do you have 1, 2, or 3 books that has changed your life? I mean, I know you said the 5 love languages, so I'm sure that's one of them. But do you have books that you recommend to others, or books that when you think back on them, these were game changers, everybody should read them?
It's funny that you mentioned those first 2 books, because when I was 19 years old, I moved off the farm and I got a job at the Fantasyland Hotel, the famous mall, right? And within 2 weeks, I ran into a guy that was involved in Amway, and, really successful guy, great organization. And he gave me those 2 books, and he said, read these 2 books. And I was like, wow, why don't they have these in high school? And I have honestly read those books and given them away, like How to Win Friends and Influence. But I think I've given that book away a dozen times. So those 2 books are key. I think everybody should read those books. There's a couple of the books I've read too. Viktor Frankl's book. That is amazing. If you want perspective, holy cow, that'll give you perspective. And The Alchemist, simple book, but I recommend the audio book because it's done in I think the woman is Spanish who reads it. And man, the story is it's so simple, but it's so key. Like, it's just one of those books that is an all-time, it's historical as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because The Alchemist, I know if I took 5 minutes to look over there, oh yeah, I can see it from here. The Alchemist is right over there, and then Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, is somewhere here. I got a few books I got to put on the shelf, and so game-changing books. So yeah, I agree completely. And Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends, game-changing. I was going to ask you, have you ever heard of, and so weird how many people haven't, considering it's sold over 15 million copies, because that's what the front cover of mine says. Have you ever heard of or read How to Stop Worrying and Start Living?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't read it. I've heard about it though.
Have you, Kelly?
No, I actually haven't.
That's Dale Carnegie. That was the book he wrote after How to Win Friends. And again, 15 million copies sold, and everybody I bring it up to said, what book is that? So
well, it's funny,
there's so many out there.
A few weeks ago, my son Cody came up. He said, "Mom, guess what books I bought?" And I'd never heard of him to buy books. But anyways, he gave me 3 books that he bought, and one was Think and Grow Rich. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome that, these are the types of books he's finding out about and reading. I love it. And he's 18.
Whatever you're doing, don't stop doing it.
100%. Kelly. I want to tell you guys what a friend of mine did with a book report, and also what you mentioned about the university. But Kelly, did you have a question for Travis? Because I want to go grab a book that I want to show everybody. Did you have a question?
Sure.
Okay.
You bet. Travis, I've got, like I said, I've got twins that are 18, twin boys, and I've got a daughter that's 21. And what I want to do is have like good male mentors in their lives so that, you know, they can grow up to be those amazing men. And they are now. But, you know, what kind of advice would you give them? Or what kind of advice would you give me as a single mom to help my boys stay on the right path?
When you're having conversations, like heartfelt conversations on the phone or with other people, don't exclude your kids. I always tell people my son's probably one of the most present 16-year-olds I know. He's actually brought friends to our house to say, you need to talk to my dad, because they're going through trials and struggles in their life. And I don't hide the conversations. When I do a live or I do a TikTok, I'll do it right in front of my son. Last night I was on the phone for just about 3 hours with a young man who is really struggling and having suicidal thoughts, and going through some crazy stuff. And my boy was sitting at the kitchen table playing with a Meccano set. And I just kept talking while he was there so he could hear the conversation, because our kids a lot of times get this one path of information. They watch these kind of videos on TikTok. They watch this on Facebook. They watch this on whatever platform. And it's just a single stream of information of the same thing all the time. And they don't get exposed to what's really out there. And I think that by allowing our kids to hear the conversations that we're having that count, they really get a good idea of what's really important. You know, so I tell my boy, like, he's like, man, oh man, like when I say, tell him I love him, he knows I love him, and that I would walk through fire for him, because I do it for anybody else. And so let them be a part of those conversations, and then ask, because it'll open up more conversation, because they'll be like, what was that about?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's one of the things that I've actually really enjoyed about, you know, being a single mom is being able to include my kids as much as possible. And even to the point where when we were doing some filming for my documentary, we filmed skydiving. And, you know, Parker was scared shitless about skydiving. He says, I don't see any reason to, you know, jump out of a perfectly good airplane, right? And he was only like 16 at the time. Yeah. And I just said, well, what the heck, right? And so when we did it and landed, he came running over to me as, you know, as soon as I landed. Said, Mom, when can we do that again? And I was like, what? You mean you like it? He goes, I loved it. And I said, well, did you get the lesson? And he goes, well, what's the lesson? Well, if you never would have done it, you never would have known how much you love it. And I asked him, and I said, why did you jump out of the plane? Because you were not going to do it right up until the day we did it. And he goes, well, Mom, I didn't want to have any regrets. I wanted to be part of the family, because we had a family plane, right? And so it was so cool that as a single mom, I was able to include my kids in that, because that was always my dream, to skydive, right? So, you know, anyway, it's just kind of cool being able to include your kids in things that are very scary, but also very life-changing, right? My daughter said that that was the best day of her life, being able to skydive, and, you know, something she never thought she'd ever do, and she did it. So, yeah, cool.
Well, and I was gonna, I'm gonna give credit to Sherry Cameron, by the way. That's who shared the name of the doctor, and I put the website in the comments. That was a side note, but I just wanted to add that before I forgot that. But yeah, Kelly, I mean, I went skydiving, and the one thing I learned is that apparently, if you're a parent, don't go. Well, you went with them, but don't go and watch your kids skydive unless you're up in the plane. Because my mom came and watched me, and she said she would never. Never. So I told you guys I wanted to share a book. I talked yesterday about how, for me, one of the most exciting things through this whole thing is getting books in the mail. We talked about how mail is coming back in style. And yesterday I received, speaking of Napoleon Hill, this book called, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, First Editions.
No.
It's called A Rare Collection of Articles, first published in Hill's Golden Rule magazine and Napoleon Hill's magazine. And then The Millionaire Club Mentor. But anyway, Greg Reed, who has worked a lot with the Napoleon Hill Foundation and done a bunch of stuff, he wrote the book 3 Feet from Gold, which was based on Napoleon Hill's work. Anyway, he sent me that in the mail yesterday because we're bringing him on for something else. And he said, can I send you this rare book by Napoleon Hill. And I'm like, yeah, you can. Anyway, so I can't wait to dive into this because this is my newest book. And I looked online. I think you can buy it on like Amazon and stuff, but I feel like they released it in a small printing when they did it in 2007. So of course there's still going to be copies around, but apparently they didn't print many copies. And so the energy, I don't know why, but I feel a certain energy from the book, and I just can't wait to dive in. And talking about the power of books, and I want to just really quickly mention two things we talked about earlier, but talking about the power of books, and Travis, I'm sure you believe in the power of energy, like that you can actually feel the energy. And Kelly, I know you do. About a year back, 2 years back, I guess now, I get a chance to hold Bob Proctor's 57-year-old Think and Grow Rich in my hand. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. It's almost like legendary now, but he's read every day from that book for 57 years.
Yeah.
And it's all fallen to pieces, and we filmed it, and we filmed it and you close up and you can see everything's been dog-eared, highlighted, and he opens it and reads something new every day. And he was telling me this story about how his assistant, while he was away, was going to get it bound again for him. And he said, and so talking about energy, that would have, in his opinion, taken away the energy. And he said this publicly, so I'm not sharing something he said privately. And he said, I don't know how I would have reacted to coming home to having that book bound again. He said, I made sure he knew that it has to stay like this. But yeah, the energy, the reason I brought that up, the energy from that book, I just can't even describe it.
Do you have a thing with hardcover books?
I like hardcover books, yeah.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah.
I like so hardcover is probably my first choice, and then and I like paperback, but if it's a paperback, I want it to be a good size.
Yeah.
I have Viktor Frankl. When I read Man's Search for Meaning, it's the little fat books, the little tiny ones, and I find them hard to hold open and read. I want to be able to hold it open like this. I don't know if you can see that, but hold it open like that, where I'm reading it and I can hold it with one hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like if it's going to be paperback, I want it to be that size. But yeah, I like hardcover more.
So the Millionaire Edition, what's that about?
I haven't touched it yet. He sent this as another one with me. He sent the Napoleon Hill one, and this was in the pack. I haven't even looked through it yet. So,
awesome.
So this guy's the real deal. So if you check him out, Dr. Greg Reed, he did the Think and Grow Rich, the documentary. He played some part in that. He produced 3 Feet from Gold, which he wrote the book, but he produced the documentary. And he's a producer on this new movie out now called Wishman. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's a really big movie now. I think it got nominated for Academy Award last year. But anyway, it's almost like the Pay It Forward movie or something like that. But wow. He's got lots of things happening and always has. So check him out. So the other thing I was going to mention is a friend of mine, what he did, talking about getting your kids to read. So when you said, Kelly, you're onto something, it made me think of this. His name is Roger Wells, to give him a shout out. And what Roger did, and I don't know if he still does it, but for the longest time, he actually, for the longest time, what he did was he got his friends to get their kids to read books, and he paid them for book reports. So basically he would say, I want you to read this book, Think and Grow Rich, and I want you to do a book report on it. And it's amazing. He said, he gave them $10 or $20. It wasn't even a big amount of money, but he said, I hope that I basically bribed them to change their life, to transform their life, essentially.
I wish I would have worked with my kids. And there was actually, my kids are really smart. My daughter's going into school for genetics. She's brilliant. And I wanted her to read some different books because they're really into fiction. And I told them, I said, well, is there any amount of money that I can get you to read a book like Think and Grow Rich, any of the books that I read? And they're like, no. I was like, right. But here's the testament to you guys being raised by single mothers is that you just have one person to think about. And I'm very much about books. Their mom is an accountant, and she's not about books. So, there is some benefits to being raised by a single parent for sure.
But I like that.
At least they're honest.
Yeah, but I like how it was no amount of money. Doesn't
none.
matter.
There was I'm like, come on, really? I'm like, no. I'm like, all right.
That's hilarious. They have no trouble saying no. That's good.
I guess,
you're raising them right.
Yeah, I guess that's the other side of the quality, right? You have to learn that's something I've learned interviewing 6,500 top influencers for the most part, is that they all say no about 10 times more than the average person. Some of them probably 100 times. And so the power of saying no, it's hard. I'd say most people that I grew up with in a small town said yes to everything and then tried to figure out how to manage it all. And so if you can learn to say no earlier, that's a nice trait. But at the same time, you kind of want to say, okay, but what are you saying no to?
Yes, exactly.
I get it on both sides. The other thing I was going to mention that you talked about the audiobooks. Only other thing I want to say, because I didn't want to leave these two things unsaid. You mentioned about a university degree as well. Almost the equivalent of a university degree if you put in the time. And I think it's Brian Tracy, that's what I'm going to credit it to, who said that you can actually get a university degree in your car. And he figured out the timeline. I think it was like 4 years of driving to work or something like that, an hour a day is the equivalent of a university degree if you just studied in university for that amount of time around professional development. So, but I mean, think about that, giving up only 30 minutes one way in traffic and 30 minutes the other way. And you could have a university degree. Like, you're probably getting the 10,000 hour rule in by sitting in your car listening to, whether it's audio, as you said, Travis, or whether you spend a half hour reading before you get in the car. It's amazing that much can transform your life. And also at the same time, how so many people don't do that. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah. And go ahead.
When are we doing your book?
Oh, right.
We got to get you to write a book and be a best-selling author.
Well,
you know who to come to, right?
I've got the Google document. Corey, you really kicked something off when I did that book with you. It was really something else. Nobody in my family's ever published a book. My brother did a thesis and he was published in a magazine. And this, telling your story is so huge. But learning how to tell your story in the way that, because if you come from a tumultuous past, a lot of times telling your story can be very invasive on people's emotions. But now I figured out a way to tell that story where it's not invasive, where it's about what I learned through the process. And you don't even have to talk about the people that were in your past. It's really that has really tweaked the way I think about things. And it all started with that book. Oh, and, as much people go, oh, you just had a little piece in there. What book are you in? And more importantly, have you ever told your story to anybody? And most people haven't.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And you have the perfect title. I mean, Men on Fire, like, that's got bestseller written all over it. It's just like,
exactly. So
it's been pretty exciting, and the impact that it's having now, the conversations we're having, it's morphed into something quite different. Like, we're actually looking at doing a global campaign right now that with some people, we've hired some coaches, and it's going to be big. It's going to be huge. Like, it's not, and it's super emotional. It's like, people think that if you do talks and you use your emotions, that eventually you're not going to be emotional anymore. No, it's not true. Like, I've read what I wrote in the book. I've read that a lot of times. It's like one of my talks. I'll actually do that talk, and every time it's as emotional as the first day.
Yeah. It's
well, June 4th, 5th, and 6th is my next event. So we got to get you in there. I'll give you a free ticket, Travis, so you can come.
All right.
I was gonna, it's funny you say that, Travis, about the, somebody saying, oh, you just have a partner book. The first book I ever wrote, that's what I did. I co-authored, like, I was in a chapter in a compilation book, and that launched everything for me as well. So to me, I don't never look at it as like only in, because it was this first story I wrote in that kind of format. It was what gave me the confidence I could be in a book, and everything started from there. But I have to say too, it's amazing, even small parts in a book. So there's a guy, and I won't say his last name because he said it in an interview, but I just rather, until I ask him, can I say this publicly? His name was Tony. I'll just say the first name. But he had a part in one of my earlier books. It was just a quote. Like, we asked, can we have quotes? We went out to people and said, hey, we're looking for quotes for the book, the back of the book. And we had 400 people, and there's more than one Tony, so don't think I gave away his name by saying go grab the book. And I'll even tell you the book. It's the book of Why and How. And at the back of that book, Tony has a quote, and he showed it to his nephew. And he said to his nephew, how many people do you know? And we have the picture in there as well. How many people in our family, is what he said, do you know have a picture in a book and their quote in the book? And his nephew goes, you're not in that book. There's no way. And he opened it up, and he said, I seen the gleam in his eyes. And he said, well, if you can do that, imagine what I can do. So is that only a piece in a book? It's like this big. And he said he showed it to coworkers and everything else. And he said he's gained credibility just by saying, look, I'm featured in a best-selling book.
Well, it's funny, people talk about, they'll make that comment, but if you get your face in a newspaper, they're cutting that clip out and they're putting it in a book. And if you're in sport, they're going to scrapbook it. If you're going to look at that as a news article that is very opinionated, very opinion driven, but a book that's in a collaboration with a bunch of other people, I mean, you got to really think about where the value is there, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
But a lot of people, and a book can be very low fame, I guess you'd call it, because people have to actually open it. Whereas a newspaper, it's being blasted all over the place, and I'm like, I don't need to be in the spotlight. I just want to tell my story. So
I love it. Well, you're doing a great job. So Travis, last question, but I'll call it, well, I'm going to ask you the super quick question because you heard me ask it before. I know we're a few minutes over time, but I just want to ask you, you heard me ask the time machine question. So basically it's just if you could jump into a time machine, go back and talk to your younger Travis and tell him or give him one piece of life advice. What do you think you might tell younger Travis?
Read more and spend more time working on yourself.
I love that. And that's so aligned with your brand. So I love that. And then the last question is, how can people connect with you to learn more?
Yeah, well, my page is right there on this side. Men on Fire on Facebook, menonfire.co. And yeah, just send me a message. And whether it's whether you're looking for a coach or you're looking for some guidance or you just want to be a part of the men's group, I have a men's group once a month. And yeah, it's a safe place to come and have a conversation with other guys. And yeah, never know what you're gonna find.
Amazing. So Kelly, any other questions for Travis before we let him run?
I love it. Are you going to do like a young men's club?
You know what? I've been asked that so many times, especially in the community that I'm in, because there's actually an organization that does stuff for young girls. And I'm working on it. I've already made some pretty big waves in the hockey community here by calling out some ethics on stuff. But it's really, you know, when you stand in your own and you say what's right, you can, yeah. Anyways, people know who I am already. I'm going to look at doing the young men's. I think that's going to take a little bit of work because I'm doing the men's stuff and we got this campaign coming up. But yeah, I've thought about it for sure.
I know, because I do a lot of work with, you know, young girls and self-esteem. And then, you know, a lot of my clients say, well, what about the boys? And I know we got to do something about the boys too, because, you know, they need help just as much as the girls do. So if you need any help with that, let me know. I'd love to be involved.
So I got a question for you guys. So when you're working with young girls, do you find that what's the biggest challenge you find when it comes to young girls and their parents or their influences? What's your biggest challenge there?
They're just too involved in social media and they don't know how to turn it off. They don't know how to take that mind shift and just say, this is not me. This is not my problem. I don't need to fight this problem. So that's the biggest problem I find, is that they just don't know how to shut off social media in their brains and in their phones.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the biggest thing. And they just let too many other people's opinions influence them.
Yeah. Corey, if you had any advice for me for what I'm doing, I know you're involved in lots of people's doing all these interviews and stuff. So what's your best advice that you could give me?
Wow. So there's a lot of directions I could go. One of them I already commented on, and the one I mostly tell people is about living on purpose, but you're already doing that. So I won't add that, but that is the most common trait of the top influencers in the world, first of all. The second thing is, and this is one I shared earlier, but it's the second most common thing, is they understand the power of saying no. So what I would say is, as you get busier and busier, the biggest thing is to realize sometimes you're going to have to say no to stuff you want to say yes to. And what I would add to that, and you may have this, I'm not sure, but what I have is a personal mission statement. And so my personal mission statement is to be the guy who motivates, donates, inspires, educates, and entertains. That 5-point system is how I decide on a yes and a no. So to me now, understanding how important it is to know what to say no to, what I can do is I can say, how many of those 5 is it when somebody asks me to take something on? If it's 0 or 1, it's the easiest no without regrets I'll ever say in my life. Even if it's an opportunity to host a TV show on a big network. And by the way, I've turned that down because of that. And then if it's a 4 or 5 of those things, so I'm doing 4 or 5 of those things I mentioned, it's the easiest yes I'll ever say without regret. So if I gave a short answer, I would say, have a system. So figure out what you're aligned with and what your alignment is. And again, I think you already probably are dialed into that, so that you know how to say no and when to say no. And then know the busier you get, the more you're going to have to say no.
That's interesting you say that, because we just said no to a partnership on a project. And we're like, yeah, it's just too much for us. It just doesn't align with what, and yeah, that's super important. Thanks. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the one that jumped out. So there's others, but that's the one that jumped out. So
yeah, awesome.
Thanks for turning the tables. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I've been really looking forward to this. And I still thought every now and then I pop in and listen to all the interviews you guys are doing when I can. And sometimes it's while I'm working. I'll just let it stream in the background while I'm working. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you guys.
That's
Well,
great.
I love to hear that, and we appreciate you, Travis. So thank you so much. I'll call it to be continued, and we'll plan to bring you back on in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Very cool.
Travis.
Thanks so much, Travis. We'll let you
Have a
run.
good one.
You too.
You bet.
So awesome stuff, Kelly. I'm going to bring our next guest right on. Only thing I want to say, something Travis mentioned that I think is really important to note is he mentioned about the difference, because we're talking about speaking and writing and stuff like that this week. He talked about the media and how people look at like a one-page article, sometimes bigger than a book. I'm gonna pull back the curtain on one thing a lot of people don't realize. A lot of times that one-page article is actually a press release. So not only is it opinion-based, and you know this, Kelly, and I know this, but a lot of times it's the person sent it into the media, written in the third person, and then it gets shared in the media as if the media wrote it. Now, I'm not revealing too much because the truth is I'm going to say it's not always that way. I mean, I get reached out by media and say, we want to write an article on you all the time. So you might not be able to identify which is which, because usually the media is good to pick up the ones that don't seem like they were written by you. But even to the point about how much credibility we put in that over a book, sometimes the person that you're reading about and you're going, wow, they're on fire, actually wrote that article themselves about themselves. So,
well, it's interesting because I have some fascinating stories about the media. And so one article that was written about me in a magazine or in a newspaper, in our local newspaper, actually landed me the medal from the Queen, because one of our MLAs saw that article about me, and it was like a full-page article, and nominated me to get the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal, right? So that's the power of what free media can do for you.
absolutely. So yeah, I'm so glad you shared that. Awesome stuff. And I know I know that's the power of it. And like I said, that's an example where they reached out to you. So it happens on both sides, but I just want to put that out there because I think sometimes people put this kind of false thing where, oh well, if they were in the media, then they're a superstar. But sometimes we have to. And by the way, it's not a bad thing. But sometimes we have to let the new media know about it themselves. They're really busy, so we have to sometimes put it out there. They pick it up and run it. They still chose to run it with us, and they still curated us. But I just, sometimes it's not written by the person whose name is on the article. Just want to put that out there.
The other thing is,
having said that, let's bring on our next guest.
Okay, let's bring on Janet.
Without further ado, so Janet Key, so excited to have you here today. Janet, I want to jump right in because we went a few minutes over time on the last interview. But I want to add, and actually that started because we started up late by about 10 minutes when I was having tech hiccups. But Janet, I wanted to get you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Of course, welcome. But I wanted to get you to tell us a little bit about yourself because that's usually how we kick things off. So welcome to the show, Janet. Meet Kelly, and also can you tell us a little bit about yourself all at once? Oh, I can't hear you right now. I don't know. Can you hear her, Kelly?
No.
Can't hear you. I see your mouth moving, but I don't know. Did you want to maybe? One thing you could try is to. You're on mute now, I think. If you want to try to unmute, see if that helps at all.
And maybe you have to go out and come back in.
That's what we usually recommend. Maybe drop off and jump right back in.
How about that?
There we go.
There we are.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I am a prosperous woman coach. I work with women and some brave men on their relationship with money. I'm from Newfoundland originally. And let's see what else. I have a background in yoga and finance. So I combine that in guiding women to clear limiting beliefs around money so that they can step more into their empowered self and create from that place.
Wow. And I love how you said, and some brave men.
Yes. Yes.
There's sort of a cool synergy there because Travis, who was just on, works a lot with men. And I would say the men that he works with that are willing to be open and share about themselves and be open with their emotions are probably among the few brave men as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we are looking at our emotions and how our money relationship can mirror for us what we need to see, how our emotions can teach us how free we really are. You have to be brave to want to go into the emotions. And I know, I know a lot of men that don't quite want to go there, right? But there's some beliefs around that.
Absolutely. And it's funny. I can hear just a little bit of the Newfoundland accent. I was listening when she mentioned that, because I was on with somebody yesterday after our event, and I forgot she was from Newfoundland, and it was just, I forget which word it was, but it was just a couple of words, and I was like, oh yes, that's right, you're from Newfoundland, right? And I'm from PEI, and I get that all the time when I'm traveling outside of PEI. People are like, which part of the Maritimes are you from? So I can hear from an accent. Awesome. So when you talk about, like, let's dive right in there. When you talk about money and the struggle that people have around money, I mean, first and foremost, do you find most cases that's based on how they were raised and their upbringing? Like, if they were told money doesn't grow on trees, we hear all the time, but money doesn't grow on trees. Millionaires are greedy people. Like, we hear all these things, and is that where it starts? Like, is that start embedding itself in? Is that early?
Yeah, absolutely. We all have a money story. And for me, throughout my life, I've done a lot of inner healing work to become this whole, healthy, prosperous woman. And I was happy in all areas of my life except my money relationship. And when I went back into my money story, that was exactly it. How I grew up, what did I see? What was my experiences like coming into the world? And on a deeper level, here's our belief system. And what was the belief that was showing up for me in my money relationship? So absolutely, we work at thinking positive in life, but then there's our belief system, right? And our belief systems will lead to the actions, which is, the things we do, the habits, and a lot of people struggle with unhealthy money habits, and it's self-sabotaging. So absolutely, those paradigms around money beliefs, what we seen, what we grew up, what was the experiences, all plays a part in exploring our money.
Now, are you familiar with the book The Millionaire Mindset by T. Harv Eker?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So one of the things that Harv Eker mentions in that book, it's the thing, how I read a lot of books, and there's usually one thing.
Me too.
Yeah, you're a book reader too. So usually, and that's a common thing, people we have on Blue Talk seem to be book readers. But when it comes to books, I always have at least one, if it's a book that I resonated with, I always have at least one big takeaway that I never forget. And with Harv Eker, the big takeaway was how he talked about your money blueprint. And what he said was, basically the gist is, if you don't reset your money blueprint, and your money's blueprint's on spend or whatever it's on, he said, if you show him your bank account and your personality, he can tell you within 10 years how much will be in your bank account. And the only way for you to escape that is to reset your money blueprint. And when you talk about old paradigms and behaviors, it seems like that's your money blueprint that you're bringing into it. Would you agree with that? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I attended his a weekend event of his Millionaire Mind. I think it was 2005. I had the book and I read it several times. And what I've come to discover now is our money blueprint is connected to our divine blueprint. So a lot of the times people aren't connected with their relationship with money in a way that's positive or is in alignment with their values. So it's kind of like this, is we become so focused externally in building our net worth, our large bank accounts, having our dream homes, which are important things as well. But there's also our enlightened net worth. And when we don't see that about ourselves, like, what's the value of our gifts, our talents, our services? What's the value of who we are, right? I love one of the things that I love this, Corey. If I were to ask you to sell me two of your eyes today for $1 million, would you?
I wouldn't.
No. And then, like, how about your heart and your brain and your other organs? It's like, if you were to put an asset, a value of what you are worth, can you even put a price tag on it?
No. I mean, I don't even think I would give you cut the tip of my finger off for $1 million. And that's not really, like, that wouldn't really bother me that much, but you can't put a price on it.
No. So here's our money blueprint. Here's our paradigm. But inside of us, if we don't see the value and the worth of who we are, it's like we are abundant already, and we're creating from a place, right? From the paradigms, from the limitations, the stories, the past experiences, or we're creating from now, right? I see my worth. I see the value in my gifts. and I'm free to share it, free from the fears, the shame, the blame, those experiences that might hold me back rather than, so absolutely, like changing your money blueprint is going deeper into what are those paradigms? Are they yours or are they someone else's beliefs that you just picked up along the way and you're creating from that place?
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny when you mention this about the worth of our, what will we trade it for? I will say an interesting follow up to that. I listened to this CBC radio interview one time. It's probably like, I want to say like 5 years ago or something. I remember exactly where I was driving when I heard it. And I'm going to come back to the what we're worth in a second. But they asked teenage kids, 14 to 18, would they rather cut their finger off or give up their iPhone? 85% said they'd rather cut their finger off.
Oh my goodness.
now that's one thing, but actually doing it, being there and letting that happen, I don't think the number would be as high, but that's how strongly tied they are to their technology. And I'm not judging that, or I interviewed, and I was going to bring him up for this other part about what we're worth, but recently interviewed last week Jen Asseroff from The Secret, and he studies a lot about the mind and neuro stuff, and he was talking about what our mind is worth, our brain. And he's really talking about the brain, but I forget that he said it's like the operating system. He compared it. It's like there's nothing in the world that's even close to what our brain can do. And so again, what is it really worth? I mean, he talked about the value of it and stuff, and there's no price tag you could put on it, yet we take it for granted.
Yeah.
I think the conversation we're going to is how we worry about feeding our car the right stuff, but yet we don't worry about what we're feeding our mind, and yet it's worth more than the most valuable car we could ever buy in our life. And so it's interesting. That's something that popped in my head because I remember he said it, and now you're saying it, and I hadn't heard anybody say that ever before. So it's like a cool synchronicity. But to go to the other part, something he said, which I think is relevant to this idea of what I just said about giving up their finger for technology. He was saying, we're always looking at, well, I don't like this change that's happening. But he brought up this thing I never thought of before. He said, how do we know that this whole thing here, like this right here, isn't saving us for something we have to do whenever we're transported to another planet or some other place because the Earth, we can't survive here anymore. How do we know that? And like he gave, he said, like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, and he gave examples of stuff that 50 years ago, we were like, why are we doing this? And then we find out 50 years later why we evolved to do that. So he said, how do we know that the teenagers of today aren't actually evolving for something that's coming up in the future? Never thought of it like that. So I know that's a way out there. We're down a different rabbit hole type thing. But anyway, came off of that idea of how much our body and mind is worth. Why don't we invest in ourselves in other ways? Considering how much we're actually worth. So I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of Corey as like, here's our energy, right? Here's our body, here's our energy. And we give our energy, our time, and our money away to plenty of things that are not, that doesn't honor us, that isn't connected to our value, right? Like you think of how and our money relationship will mirror that for us. If we're not respecting money, chances are we're not respecting ourselves, or if we don't see the value in ourselves, there's a disconnect in money. And, for example, like eating your paycheck, it's like how much money, do people spend in eating their paycheck versus am I using money in a way that is more important to me, or am I spending it in areas that are not as important to me, right? And it happens all the time.
Well, I wanted to ask you as well, and I'm just kind of, referencing some things that I've heard over the years, and I always like to, about money, and I always like to get somebody else's take on them. But one of the other things that I'm sure most of us listening here, especially if we're Canadian, have heard of, which is The Wealthy Barber, and David Shilton's first book that he talked about giving away, donating, I guess, or giving away 10% and saving 10% before you ever touched anything else, like before you ever touched your expenditures and all that. What are your thoughts around that? Like, is that something you advise people, or what are your thoughts? Should we put away the savings first? Should we, tithe first? I mean, I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can bring it to when it comes to yoga. I'm not sure how familiar you are with our energetic system and our heart chakra. This is our place where this is our inner nurture. This is a place of love. This is where I am giving unconditionally. I am receiving unconditionally. So women are great givers, and they often give away a lot of their time and their energy and their money, attention to other people. And at the same hand, the receiving end, there's a bit of a blockage there, whereas they feel guilty about wanting more. They feel guilty about taking time out for themselves or really looking after themselves. So while giving is important in whatever way that you give, if it's tithing to a charity that's important to you, giving to your own savings fund, because really it's like, what is important to you? Saving for your future, saving for now. And at the same time, there's this receiving part. And while a lot of women really want, their own sense of freedom, they want to live a prosperous life, and they want to have peace, and when it comes to money, but at the same time, they have a hard time with receiving. So here's the exchange of energy and the freedom of flow. So if I'm always giving, I can often give at the sacrifice of self. And I may also feel resentful because what I give is not reciprocated. So it's kind of, do you kind of get where when it comes to the giving part, it's like we have no trouble giving, but at the same time, we need to receive, and we need to open those channels to receive. And often in our heart chakra, we're not open to receive because we have lower, our foundation is weakened by past experiences, by abuse, by trauma, through those beliefs that it all connects within the energetic system within ourselves, can block the receiving part, if that makes sense.
Oh, it for sure does. And I know that's an area I struggled with throughout my life. Is it was easy for me to give to others and serve others, but not so easy to receive. And I didn't even identify it until I started noticing when people tried to give me a compliment. Like, for example, I would deliver a keynote talk and somebody come up and say, "What you said there just changed my life. This is going to change how I do things." And I would say, "Well, thanks so much. It's easy to do when you're living on purpose." And like I would try to basically give them back, but not realizing, and this is what had to happen for me, is that I was robbing them of the power of giving. Yeah. So I wanted to be a giver, and I wanted to, give. And I knew without purposely giving to get something back, I knew I was getting something every time I gave to somebody. And I had to actually understand that these same people that I want to serve and give to so much, I'm robbing them of being able to give to me. And it was a lot of work to get there. And it's funny how I didn't even know that was an issue until somebody said along the way somewhere, like, "Well, you're sort of doing a disservice to them, aren't you?" And it wasn't even somebody I thought would say it. And then I was like, they're right. Like, I'm robbing them of what I want to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And denying yourself of your own worth and the value that you are creating a positive impact in the world, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And I want to ask you as well, because there's another side. If we talk about, this week we talk a lot about influence and people that want to impact lives. But I feel like there's two sides of that. There's the side, and when I talk about this, I mean about abundance and earning money. There's a lot of influencers that can earn money like they do a wash, like it's nothing to them. However, the flip side is they don't necessarily manage the money well on the back end. And so where the trouble comes in is, what if they can't earn money for a short amount of time or a long amount of time? And so, and we see it often where people that are on spend as their blueprint, we see people that win the lottery and then what we hear 3 months later, they're broke. Yeah. And so I remember, I go back to Harv Eker for a second, and you probably remember this either from the book or what he said in his workshop, but he talked about how he became a millionaire, I think twice, and then spent all the money and realized that he knew how to make $1 million, but he didn't know how to keep $1 million. And so you talk to that as well, because I feel like it's one thing to earn, and money, for some people is a dirty word, but it's one thing to actually bring in the money and be abundant with money. But at the same time, it's also probably just as important how much of that money you keep and tuck away for when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There is, there's the physical management of money, which is so important. And I know that a lot of people struggle with it. So there's that part. It's like, what is important to me? Is it looking after my family, having those retirement savings? And then there's the emotional aspects of money. And, that's a very important part as well, because emotionally, we are when it comes to our emotions, we're either in a place of love or a place of fear. And what's the root cause of, I get all this money and then I give it all away? What's the root cause, the root belief that is within someone that causes them to do that? So the emotions around money, when I'm in a fear place, when you're serving from that place, it is, from those emotions of guilt, shame, blame, judgment, criticism. When you talk about when you can go to the energy aspects of that, that's the lower energy, and it doesn't feel so good. Money, it's not, money can be used for good things. The more money I make, the more good I can do in the world, that kind of a mindset around money. So having money in a way where you're using it for the good of the world is coming from more of a higher vibrational place of love, right? When you're connected to that and you're in that place of service, then you're more open to your intuitiveness, your creativity, you're inspired, you're empowered. We make choices all the time when it comes to money. And where am I making that choice from? Is it from the higher part of self, from living my purpose, moving forward from that place? Or is it from the shadow side of self, from the fear side of self, in not good ways, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to ask you as well, because you mentioned you're a reader. So I wanted this week I've been trying to ask people about, what books they recommend, what books changed their life. I'll share really quickly the 4 books that popped into my head right away when I was going to ask you this question, so I can add some extras, and maybe even you can say if any of these are yours. But for around money, for me, I mentioned The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, or I think Secrets of the Millionaire Mindset, one of the two. It's similar to that name. The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
I mentioned The Wealthy Barber, played some part, a little bit of a degree of, what I learned about money. And the other one, which is the more controversial of the 4, although, the book sold 26 million copies, so I'm not saying it wasn't liked, but is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the reason I feel that one, for some people, is controversial is because Robert Kiyosaki, which I feel like if you read deeper into what he's saying, it actually can help you around money. But he talks about how, to him, a house isn't an asset. And that gets people really riled up, because that's for most people, they feel their biggest asset. Yeah. And what he's saying is your home is an asset if you don't have to pay money to have that home. So what he's saying is, if you own a $500,000 home and it's paid for, it's an asset. But he's saying if you own a mortgage on it in any way, shape, or form, it's a liability because you have to output money. So your equity in it can still be $400,000 and you only owe 100, but he's saying it's still not an asset because you have a liability to it, or you lose the home. So he basically said, if he has feeling is if you have to spend any money to not lose it, it's not an asset yet. But that's very controversial to a lot of people, because nobody wants to think of their home as a liability. So but I think it also, though, gets you thinking in a different way, because he makes the argument then, if you're home now, if you're renting it out, you have 2 bedrooms downstairs and you rent it out, now it's an asset because it's bringing in money. Anyway, I'd like to get your thoughts on the books that speak to you, but those are 4 of the books I always think of around money.
Yeah, absolutely. I read all 4 of those books, and it was quite some time ago. I'd say The Millionaire Mind was the one I reread again just a few months back. Think and Grow Rich. I love to read books that inspire me to grow. Like, I'm not one to, read, for mind candy. Every now and then I will, but I really love to be inspired. And I started years ago when my girls were smaller. When I started on my journey, I say to, seeking my truth, find, I wanted happiness in my life. Books came into my life. Seed of the Soul, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I absolutely, reread that one. I don't know how many times. So there are definitely so many, even like smaller parables. God on a Harley, like little books like that inspire spiritual growth, because I've always been, that spiritual aspect of self was really important. And to the asset of the house, Corey, what I'd love to say is that we are our greatest asset as humans, right? And I love to, one of the favorite things I love to teach is our enlightened net worth. And it really brings people's perception about themselves. Like, I'm my greatest asset, right? And when you see that, you get to think about yourself a little bit differently, because we don't see ourselves. Our perceptions around ourselves is, for a lot of people, a lot of women, and even men, is I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, and those types of things. So I'd like to bring it to, we are our greatest asset. So let's put that first and move forward from that place. But I have a library, and I want my library to be my legacy that I leave behind.
I love that, because it's funny. Somebody just asked me about legacy in an interview on Friday of last week. It was JV Crum III. I remember who it was now. Conscious Millionaire, speaking about money. And he asked me what I wanted my legacy to be. And I basically told him, and then I just made the comment. I said, even if that one thing survives longer than my body. And where that came from is I hear Grant Cardone being interviewed by Darren Hardy with Success Magazine. Mm-hmm. And Darren said, what do you want your legacy to be? And he said, what does legacy mean to you? And he said to me, legacy is when something you put out in the world lives longer than your body. And I always love that visual. And so for me, I said one thing, and I said, for that one thing. And he goes, why are you only thinking of that one thing? He said, isn't the goal of us to have a legacy and build something that does live long beyond us? And then we started talking about Think and Grow Rich. And, that book, you mentioned it, Kelly will tell you, because she's been involved in these interviews with me since June, that book comes up every single time we do this event, usually 4 or 5 times. And I just heard the number the other day, and I don't know how far above and beyond this it is, but I heard the number the other day that it's now over 200 million copies sold. So think of the legacy Napoleon Hill's. 1937, he wrote that book. And it's funny, I don't know if you saw this earlier, but I said I just got a book in the mail. Napoleon Hill's first editions. I had never heard of it before, and I'm a big Napoleon Hill fan. And Greg Reed said, can I send you this book? I'm giving him another shout out. And I said, you can certainly send me that book. And by the way, that's a power of me receiving, because before I would have said, oh, you don't have to do that. Yeah. maybe it helped a little bit that I'm a huge fan of Napoleon Hill, and I'm like, I want the book that's hard to get and I'll never read otherwise. But to that point, I mean, what a legacy, right? What a legacy that we're saying his name almost 100 years after he wrote his book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that book, to your point, because you said you like the spiritual side and the money side. And what I love about that book, I've said this many times, the name is so misleading. And I know he did that on purpose, because he wrote it in the Great Depression, and he wanted people to go, I want to get rich and I'm going to buy this book to learn how. But what I love is what he did is he tricked you into becoming wealthier as a person. He tricked you into reading a book that's going to make you a better overall person, make you more wealthy, to help you grow personally, and not just how to make money. In fact, I would say, and I don't know if you would agree with this, I would say the money comes naturally, but he doesn't really go in and he doesn't even say, here's how much you should put away, here's savings, none of that stuff. And you would think by reading the name of that book, it's going to be in there talking about here's how you calculate accounting and everything. There's none of that in there.
Yeah. It's the power of our minds and organizing our lives and our thoughts and, our habits in a way that is all in alignment, with our desires. I know for me, my 3 desires in life was to be happy, to have healthy, happy relationships, and to have freedom. And, a number of things had to happen before I came into alignment with that. And I had to do a lot of changing into the person who I am. And I recently, Napoleon Hill really inspired me. And when I listened to Outwitting the Devil, have you heard that one? Oh my God, I was like, so awesome, right? With the, the role that fear plays in our lives. And for me, in life, there's challenges are inevitable, fears are inevitable. And most people, and, myself included, at some time in life, run from our fears. And, with the work that I'm doing and come to see, here's fear, here's the energy of fear. Here is how it plays out in our lives. And if we move through it, we can actually move to the light side, the higher part of self, the soul self. By moving through our fears can teach us if we move through them. So when I read or when I listened to an audiobook, Outwitting the Devil, it just blew my mind that, the concepts that, he shares, how relevant it is now.
Oh yeah. That book was easily, well, whatever amount of years it is since it was written, I think it was like 1939 or something, whatever amount of years it is till it's written, he had another 10 years. He was that far ahead of time with that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
He talked like it's interesting. I mean, and I won't go into politics or not, but he almost like he talked about stuff that made it seem like he was foreshadowing a president like Donald Trump. Like it's really weird. Like it's like really weird. Like the stuff that it's almost like he was a futurist. But it's really weird how we're reading it this many years later and it seems timely. And I'm sure somebody, if they read it 20 years ago, it probably felt timely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just goes to show, like, here's the power that is within us, right? The power that can move through us if we are open, if we move through those fears and we, open our own channels to receiving and giving, serving from that place, of free will, right? Free of the fears, free, to serve from that place of love, that higher power of self. And it's amazing. I love it.
Amazing. Yeah. So, Kelly, I want to pass it over to you as we start to wind down to see questions that you might have for Janet. I've been hogging all the time here.
No, it's no problem. After Janet, I was going to say, what was your money story? Like, clearly there must have been a money story in you that made you want to, change your life and impact others.
Yeah.
What was your money story?
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned how I was happy in all other areas of my life, and it was in my money story. And when I heard the word that money was energy, it spoke directly to my soul. And I'm like, okay, I needed to hear something here. And I delved into my money story and I answered specific questions. And then it took me on a journey of learning more and diving deeper. But when I went back, when I came into the world, I was placed for adoption twice. So the first 7 days, and then again 3 months later. Now, my mom did keep me upon the approval of her father. But my dad, my mom was 17. My dad in his early 20s would be diagnosed with a severe mental illness. And I would grow up in an environment that was abusive, violence, and addictions. So, I grew up, my family did not know how to express love easily. So for me, I was seeking love like all my life. And I remember as a young girl praying to something. I didn't grow up in a religious background by any means, or wasn't taught about anything, to do with spiritualism. But I prayed for happiness. And so that was, I look back at my story, we didn't grow up with a lot. And my dad was not able to provide for our family financially. And so we, my mom did the best she could and relied on social services systems. And I never really thought about money back then in my life. Honestly, I had bigger troubles, right? I had my own inner sense of the common theme, Kelly, that I recognized for myself was that I was not enough. And I had done a lot of healing work is the thing. It's like I'd done a lot, from the age of 25 to 35. When I was given a key to happiness was to live your truth. I was like, I wanted happiness. I was willing. I'm like, I'm ready. Tell me what do I have to do? And teachers came into my life like books and yoga and healers, horses, they all came into my life to teach me about, to clear up the misunderstandings that I had, right? That I was enough, that I was lovable, that, all these things happened to me. And I was able to look at them through a different lens, be able to forgive my parents by looking at, where they come from and that kind of thing. So by taking, then another key learning about the power of my thinking, right? My thoughts, what I think about is how I feel, is what I do about. When I took all of that into my money relationship, and I had been in a healthy, happy relationship with my current husband. And when I compared my money relationship with it, I was like, I felt anxiety when it left me. I never trusted it to be there for me. I felt controlling. I was in a corporate role where I had a pension, I had savings, but I felt like there was never enough and I felt undervalued. So it's like all of these things made up my money story and helped me to be like, I needed to break up with my money relationship because my desire for financial freedom, my beliefs and my story was not in alignment with the success and the financial freedom that I wanted.
Oh, it's powerful.
Yeah.
So
very powerful.
I I was going to tell you guys that what happened was I disappeared for a second because I wanted to show people so they would know what it looks like.
Yeah.
They wouldn't get humble. And Kelly's probably, because Kelly's on here enough with me, I think she's probably going to think I have a bookmaking machine somewhere here in the office. Every book that somebody mentions, I go and grab it to show it. But here, I'll give you a second book that you should check out, Janet, if you're a fan of Napoleon Hill. Have you ever heard this one?
Mental Dynamite. I haven't.
It's actually his interviews with Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah.
So
nice.
The interviews that made up Think and Grow Rich, it's the actual interviews, like the Q&A, those interviews.
Thank you. Yeah,
and the newest book I'm reading right now is this one, The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
Yeah, I haven't.
I'm reading that. And what's that? Sorry.
No, thank you for sharing that. I will totally check it out.
Yeah, check that one out. And I'm reading The 11th Insight by James Redfield and The Miracle Morning by Hal. So that's my two books I have in the go. So books, to your point, have changed my life. And so what I love about this conversation is we've been talking about money and finances, and yet we've been talking about growth and spirituality at the exact same time. And I know in your world, they're both completely intermixed.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to ask you before we let you run, and there's never enough time, with your permission, I'll call it like I have usually with people, a to be continued, because I think we have so much more we can scratch the surface on. But I have a two questions to finish things off. One is, I can tell you in advance, it's just going to be, how can we learn more? That's always my last question. How can we find you and all that stuff? But before I ask that, I have the time machine question that I try to ask every guest. Time machine question is like this. If you could jump into a time machine, go back and talk to a younger Janet, give her a piece of life advice based on what you learned in the years since, what do you think you might tell younger Janet?
It's safe to be you. It is safe to be me. Yeah. Yeah. And, gosh, that's like, Corey, that's such a great question. Right. And, I would tell her, that, her desires are all going to come true, and that she is very worthy of great love, and she's going to give a lot and create a great impact in the world. Yeah.
I so love that.
Yeah.
So awesome. So, last question, as I said, is just how can we learn more? So can you tell us a little bit about how we can learn more?
Absolutely. So my website is super easy, janetkey.com. I have, if you're into, money quizzes, you want to know your personality type, there's an archetypal quiz. So it'll tell you, what's your archetypes when it comes to money, so that what's your divine blueprint, what makes up you. So that's a free quiz on my website. My email is prosperous4women@gmail.com.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So Kelly, any super quick last questions? I know our next guest is waiting, so I just want to make sure I didn't take all the thunder today. So any other questions or any last quick questions before?
No, I asked the one that I wanted. It was the one question I was thinking right from the beginning. And yeah, thank you, Janet. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, Corey, so much for today.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Janet. And like I said, we'll call it a to be continued, and we'll make it happen again in the near future. And thanks for all your great insight today.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. You too. So let's bring our next guest right on. And Kelly, I think from our conversation earlier, I have to, I'll be able to do half of the interview, but I have to drop off. So I'm letting both of you know and everybody else know I have to drop off, but then I'll be circling back. I'm hoping to circle back when our last guest is on, our last guest is on.
Because you'll have to bring her on for me, right? Because...
And so I want to try to stay on for as much of this interview as I can, and then I'll be watching in the background to let the next guest on. But let's bring Chris Gordon on right away. And Chris, we want to welcome you, get you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Confirm for me that I'm right when I said that you are taking part in the Be On TV bootcamp as well, and how are things going? So all of that at once, Chris.
All right. Well, I'll try to do it in order. So first of all, hi, Corey and Kelly. It's great to see you guys again. I am doing very well. Thank you very much. Yes, I am in the Beyond TV Bootcamp for my second time, and things are going very well. I am a husband and father of 3 fantastic kids, and my wife's pretty good too. And we live in, as you see down there, New Ulm, Minnesota. I'm a special education teacher for an online school. So not just pandemic online, it's structured to be an online school. I've been doing that since 2012. As you might be able to tell, I'm a little bit of a geek. I have my Avengers Hawaiian shirt on because I want to think warm thoughts. And for you, of my neighbors in the north, I have Deadpool up there. He is Canadian, so he is representing there. And the reason why I'm here, though, is because 6 years ago, I scratched by hand my garage wall. Now, people get scratches all the time, you think. That's not a big deal. Well, that scratch turned into some permanent cosplay. I contracted what's called necrotizing fasciitis, or flesh-eating bacteria. So for a comic book guy like me, it's a beautiful origin story. I spent 2 months in the hospital in Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. As you can see here, I needed a lot of skin taken off my arm, shoulder, chest, and back on my right side. I also needed a flap of skin taken from my left thigh in place of my right hand because the infection had gone so far into my right hand, the doctors were certain at the beginning of my second surgery that they would have to amputate. But thankfully, an occupational therapist who was in attendance at the surgery saw that it still had hand function. So they took a flap of skin from my left thigh, placed it in my right hand, and I affectionately call this my fan. I have to copyright that, I think.
Yes.
I know all about skin grafts because I've had a ton of them from when I was 2 when I got burnt as a 2-year-old. So I know all about skin grafts.
They are a different animal. I have learned that I need to be careful when I run because I am a seasoned runner. I actually ran a 5K in 19 minutes, 30 seconds, actually under that, the week before I was in the hospital. So I was a pretty healthy guy going in, and I still got this, still contracted NF. So anyone can get it. So I don't mean to scare anyone, but, a lot of people who are predisposed, with immunodeficiency syndromes, with other health issues, usually get it. But healthy guys like me also get it. So, it's something to look out for. But yes, skin grafts, they are something. They don't sweat, so my arm starts to cook once in a while, so I have to be careful of that. However, I'm pretty good at the polar plunge. So there's that. And fun fact, I save a lot of money on deodorant because they're non-porous, they don't sweat. So a stick of deodorant can last up to 6 months for me.
Wow.
So, it's about seeing the bright side of things, those silver linings. But the reason why I'm here, because, not only because of the NF, is because during my hospitalization, I was at a crossroads. Obviously, my life had changed irrevocably. And I was faced with all of this new information, all of these changes. And I very much could have adopted a negative mindset. I could have let the woe is me, why me syndrome set in. And my life could have taken a very dark path. Mm-hmm. But a conversation with my wife really illuminated to me how blessed and how grateful I actually was for not only the family and friends and my house, my job, and everything that was really nice and big in my life, but also the small things. And I use that to develop what I call the attitude of gratitude, or TAG. And from that mindset, from developing TAG, I have really found a drive within myself to be the best person I can be, to set goals for myself. For example, since I was discharged from the hospital, I've set or tied 4 personal running records. I've become a recommended black belt in Taekwondo. I've earned another teaching degree. I've set a goal of qualifying for the Boston Marathon in the next 9 years. And I've become a professional speaker and writer. which is how you know me, Corey. And so I want to share the attitude of gratitude, or tag, with others, especially high schoolers, young adults, so they can overcome their own personal bacteria. Because I really hope no one else catches this stuff. I mean, it is rare, but still it's nasty. But we all have our problems. We all have our issues. None of us is perfect. And we're all going to have to face those personal bacteria at some point. And by using tag, someone can not only overcome those issues, but also, as I say, pass on perfection and go for greatness on their own terms.
And so, having said that, Chris, let's dive into the gratitude side first. What do you recommend for people around gratitude to show their gratitude, to be more grateful? Like, do you recommend? We hear a lot about gratitude journals. We hear a lot about people, saying just like saying out loud, like affirmations almost. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. What do you recommend?
It's up to the person. As you said, there are many different ways to display gratitude. I personally, on my Facebook pages, I take every 3 days, and I will either write a T post, an A post, or a G post. And a T post is something I'm thankful for. An A post is I share my appreciation with someone, and I give that reason for why they are appreciated. And the G is I give someone else an idea for how they can make others feel grateful. Like, for example, I'm still a runner, and I like to pick garbage up off the street when I'm running to make my neighborhood more beautiful. And so, you could do Facebook posts. Again, the journal is a fantastic idea. I just, I've been living this mindset for the last 6 years. And so it's kind of ingrained in me, especially in those moments where I want to say something negative and I want to retort to someone. I first realized, okay, how is this going to look if I, the tag speaker, the gratitude guy, just goes off on someone on social media or in real life? But secondly, I think about, okay, what can I gain from this? And a lot of times I see that I've really grown as a person, because old me would have, come up with a snide comment and, felt good. Yeah, I really got him. But the ability to step away from the conversation, from that potential situation, say, you know what? This situation is below me, not the person, but the situation that I could have drummed up, or the situation that person's trying to cause, is below my higher purpose. And so I find gratitude that, you know what? I'm grateful that I can look beyond that. I can step away from that situation. So, there are many different ways people can do it. Actually, I'm creating an online course where people actually have a journal that I give them, and they practice every morning, or, a time where they feel most grateful, or when they really want to feel grateful, they can jot down 3 things that they are grateful for. And then they work in the whom do they appreciate, and thinking of other ways they can make someone feel grateful themselves.
I love it. And I feel like gratitude is one of those areas that is really underestimated. The power of gratitude and what it can do for your life. And, Kelly, maybe before we go on to a different area outside of gratitude, I'd love to let you jump into this and maybe share your thoughts or any questions as well for Chris around gratitude.
Well, gratitude is a huge thing. And, I believe that when we're more grateful, we learn to appreciate ourselves more, our lives more, and how we can help others. Right? I'm so grateful. Like, even yesterday, I helped one of my clients become a best-selling author. And, I was just so grateful that I got to meet her when I did, so that I could help her to, do the right thing so she could be a best-selling author. And so I'm just so grateful that I learned that, and I'm so grateful that I was actually able to share it with her.
That's great, Kelly. And what I like about it is that you're actively grateful. I think a lot of people, when they say they're grateful, it's more of a passive thing. Yeah, I'm thankful for my family, thankful for my friends. It's like they're saying it out of obligation. But when you take that active gratitude and you use it to motivate yourself to do good works, to help someone out, that's really when gratitude sets in and it really becomes a force for good. And that's why I press on that G part of tag so much, because as I like to say, playing tag by yourself is boring and a little embarrassing. I don't know how I know this. I'm not going to reveal any sources, but it's a social game. And so you want to play with others, and that active gratitude is essential to making the world a better place.
Well, I think also people need to dig a little bit deeper. Like, it's one thing to say, yes, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my kids, but there's also a deeper level towards it, right? Like, I'm happy, I'm grateful I've got my kids and my family and, my friends. But what's that one level deeper?
When I think of that, and that's a very good question, by the way, Kelly. When I think of that, I look at items around my house and I think about, how am I grateful for that item? Not only when I need it, but when I don't need it. For example, this flashlight here. All right, it's an ordinary flashlight. You can get it at any dollar store. It's good to have. And it's, I'm glad I know where it is. But when I can't find it and I'm searching in the dark for it, and then I finally do locate it, it becomes the most valuable item in my house. And so being able to, I guess, focus gratitude on ordinary little things is something very powerful, because we find that we are richer than we ever thought possible. Because, when it comes down to it, when you're, in the dark, you're, pawing around for a flashlight, you could grab $100 bill. That's not going to help you. No amount of money is going to make you see better, in the dark. It's being able to be thankful for what you have. That's going to do it.
Going into the flashlight story a little bit deeper, when we went to Africa, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago when we went, and I was asking my friends if they had pencils or pencil sharpeners or notebooks for me to take to Africa to give to the burn kids. And one guy said, "Hey, I have these little flashlights that are on keychains, just like smaller than what you have." He said, "Do you want them?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll take them." So I took them with me and I gave them out to the burn survivors that had this big, massive gas explosion. And 100 people died and 100 people lived.
Oh, wow.
And so I gave them, there was about 60 people there. So I gave them each one of these little flashlights. Well, the next day I got an email from one of the guys, and he said, "Thank you for the flashlights. My kids can now read their homework at night because they don't have power in that slum." And so as soon as the sun goes down, they don't have power, they can't read. And they don't really want to use candles, because that's why there's so many fires and stuff there, is because the candles burn things down, right? Yeah. So I didn't know the power of that little keychain flashlight until I got that email.
That's
something
beautiful.
we take for granted, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful, Kelly. I mean, because we never know how someone is going to be affected by an act of gratitude. And that's something I also really stress in my talks, is that it could cost you zero monies, as I like to say, or $0 to do an act of kindness. But to that person who's receiving it, it could be priceless.
Right.
You think of the person think of the cashier who has to wear a mask all day, and they're in the supermarket, they're coming across people all day, people who aren't happy that they're wearing masks. And, they have their own issues that they have brought into the store as well, the cashiers. And so when you can just say hi and give them a compliment, "Hey, I like your mask. when I can see your face, I like your smile. And, so just giving a little compliment might really turn someone's day around. We never know how deeply affected they might be.
Yeah, I want to jump in here, and I'll share one quick thing because I know I have to run very soon, but I wanted to add this in for you guys. What you're talking about here, it speaks to me in such a big way because Shelly and I, we did a thing we called the Invisible Impact Tour whenever we were driving across North America. And so we drove across 26 states, 5 provinces in 16 days. And
Wow.
we actually had a little dog in the car with us, and we stopped everywhere. Like we went to the Grand Canyon, we went to see Garth Brooks live. We did stuff at every place. But why I bring it up is because we were handing out like gift packs, I'll call them, or almost like care packs. So like deodorant and toothbrushes and a bag of almonds, and everyone we got together a whole bunch of care packs. And so we're handing them to people on the street. And what I found intriguing to me was I remember we were in Seattle and we're walking out, and there's these 2 guys that were there, and they were playing drums. But they were, I think they were both maybe homeless. That's an assumption, but it seemed like that. And they had buckets there for money and stuff. And we went by, and I gave them 2 things. I gave them a business card. We had a business card made that said, smiles are free, pass them on. And then we gave them the care pack. And around the business card, I had $20 for each of them. And what I found intriguing is both of them were making they talked to each other and like, check this out. They're making such a fuss over the business card that said smiles are free, pass them on, that they actually ignored the $20 bill.
Mm.
And, to your point, we always think it's the money, but for them, for whatever reason, that was, the fact that somebody acknowledged them, I think. And we gave them the care pack, and they were looking through the care pack, but they didn't even really pay attention to the $20 bill, which was actually worth more than everything that they were holding in their hand combined. And we found that to be the case almost everywhere we went. We'd hand out the care packs. We didn't always hand out money. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But it's amazing to your point about, these little things that you would think, well, why would a business card mean anything to them? Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, it was that reminder that we can all still smile no matter how much we have. And It can make a difference in somebody else's life. Now, I will say we had one experience, which is, to me, it's still funny, but it was a weird experience. But we were walking down the street, and my girlfriend handed a card to somebody who was like walking past really quickly. And we were walking the dog, and he had his own little shirt on that said smiles are free, pass them on. And everybody was making a big fuss over him. Anyway, this guy comes past, and she handed him the card, and he took it, and he read it, and he said, sorry, I'll try harder next time. And so it's funny how perception, right? He took it as almost like we're saying you're not smiling enough. Like as if we made business cards to hand them out only to people that were frowning and saying you need to start smiling more. But it's funny how he took it so differently. And then we had people that you would have thought the money would have been the big thing, and they would have threw the rest out, and they were making such a big fuss. So again, to your point, Kelly was saying about the flashlight, you just never know how you feel something small is going to make such a big difference in somebody's life. I just wanted to add that in.
No, that's a great story, Corey. Thanks for sharing that.
It kind of blew my mind. And I'll tell you, the invisible impact side of it was we weren't just going and saying we want acknowledgement. We were doing like putting the cards and doing other things, leaving them in rest stops all the way through too, because you never know who's going to receive it. We'll never hear from them. They'll never say, hey, I got this. They wouldn't even know how to say I got this. So we don't need that acknowledgement. And but it was rewarding for us because we knew we were making a difference in some small way. But yeah, like just to Kelly's point, we didn't know how big of a deal it made until we handed them out. We got the cards made. We had shirts that said invisible impact, smiles are free. We were trying to bring smiles to people's faces, and that was our whole goal. But we didn't know how well it would work and how big of an impact it would make. Because again, we still thought, well, we better have the money because that stuff probably won't matter as much, but it seemed to matter more.
That's very interesting. That's a nice social experiment, but I'm glad that for the most part, you received a positive impact, or you made a positive impact, which is what you wanted to do.
Well, and I will say the guy that said, I'll try harder next time, Shelly said, no, that's not what we mean. And she explained to him. He goes, oh, sorry, I mistook that. I mean, we still chatted with him, and he was still fine. But yeah, that was one experience out of probably 150 people we interacted with. So I just wanted to share that. So I'm going to be running here in a second, but Kelly, I'll hand it over to you. But I was going to ask Chris, maybe can you tell us as well, and I'll probably dip out as you guys are talking about this. But can you tell us, since Kelly was involved in the Blue Talks book as well, a little bit about your experience with the Blue Talks book? Like, what the experience was writing it, why you wanted to write and get that out to the world, and all that kind of good stuff?
Definitely. Definitely. And again, Corey, thank you so much for involving me in that. I greatly appreciated the opportunity. And so when I was writing my story, it was the first time I really penned it out. Obviously I lived it. And so a lot of things I knew. A few things I actually had to ask my wife about because I was either unconscious or I was, pardon the phrase, so hopped up on drugs because of the painkillers that I hallucinated some things, and some things were not as clear as I had thought. And so I had to talk with her a little bit, but it was very cathartic because it really laid it out for me about how my story could really impact people. And I wrote it after I decided to become a speaker, but it really fleshed out for me how important the story really is. And I know that a lot of us speakers feel imposter syndrome, that, why do I need to talk about this? There are people who've suffered many worse things than I have. Who am I to inspire people? But as I was telling some students this morning, we are the stars of our own show. And so that's not taking away anything from anyone else because they're the stars of their own show. But as stars of our own show, we have a show to run. We have a story to tell. And who knows who might find your show their favorite. And so I found that sharing my story with the book, which I have right here, I'm sure you probably saw it. I can lift it up really quick here. The Blue Talks presents Business Like a Universe Volume 3. And so I felt really positive about putting it into the book because it affirmed to me that yes, my story is worth sharing, and it is going to impact someone, and hopefully, like that invisible impact you're talking about, it will affect someone in a positive way and help them out. Because ultimately, that's what I want to do with my story and my message, is to help people out and make this world a better place.
Amazing. So Kelly, I'm going to pass it over to you, but thank you so much, Chris. Always a pleasure, and I'm going to call it to be continued because I know we'll have you back on and again in the future.
That sounds great, my friend. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, no.
Great. Oh, well, Chris, I'm really enjoying our conversation here today. It's great. So, what else do you want to share? You've got like so much to go on, to share. So, go for it.
Okay. Well, as I'm reaching out to people, I'm finding that not only do I have the speaking, to share, but I'm also, like I said, I'm trying to do an online course, and I found a way to share all my different things on one site. This sounds like a commercial for Linktree, and maybe it is, but here I go. I have a Linktree site, linktr.ee/Chris DT Gordon, and I have my speaking sites up there. There's one that through Speaker Hub that has a lot of information about me, and testimonials from recent talks that I've given. One's under construction right now. I'm having a friend of mine help me with that. My YouTube channel, my podcast. And I guess we could talk about that. Talk about my podcast because I think that's how Corey and I. One of the ways we got connected was in January of last year. That's when I decided to become a speaker. I had tried a couple other things in terms of using my experience and my story, but they just weren't me. And I finally realized around January 2020, I need to share me. I need to speak. And being a teacher, being someone who's been on stage before, it's not a hard transition because I'm used to talking with people. So I started my journey. Well, As you know, a couple months later, March 2020, COVID said, no, you're not. You're going to stay home. And so I figured, well, I'm not going to let this deter me. So I pivoted and I started my podcast called Scar Bearers. And initially, it was a way for me to hone my speaking skills, keep them sharp, and share my story on a weekly podcast that cost next to nothing. I did have to buy some equipment, but other than that, it was very reasonable. However, as I quickly found out, there are other people who have stories to share besides me. And it's called Scar Bearers, not just Scar Bearer. So I started inviting other NF survivors, survivors of necrotizing fasciitis, survivors with TBIs, double lung transplants. In fact, are you guys familiar with Mark Black?
No, I'm not.
He is a double lung transplant recipient who has actually turned that situation around and run 4 marathons.
Wow.
And he's a public speaker as well. I would check him out. He's a fellow Canadian.
Yep.
So I'll look him up. I have met some fantastic people during this journey as a podcast host, and I've entered season 2. And I decided to spread my seasons 50 episodes each, just because I like 50. It's a round number, and it just worked for me. And it gave me something to stretch for.
Right.
So this week I'm releasing episode 52 with a fellow NF survivor, actually another Canadian, Ty Stingle, who is a missionary and a teacher like myself. And I found a lot of connections with it, obviously, but also some real fulfillment. It feels like I'm really living TAG, really living the attitude of gratitude by offering people this platform where they can share their own stories. And actually, some people have actually grown during the conversations we've had. I recently was talking with a new children's author. Her name is Nancy Torres. And during our conversation, she connected the dots between her late aunt, with whom she was very close, and the book. Her aunt died in 2007, but a long time before that, her aunt gave her a journal, and that's where she started writing. And so we were able to make that connection between the aunt and the book she was talking about now. And so that was very powerful. And so, yeah, Scar Bears can be found on Apple, Spotify, all the podcasty places. And the YouTube channel mirrors those interviews and those conversations. And then I have obviously been published in Who Talks Presents.
Who Talks, that's right.
I am I believe we were talking with Janet. You were talking about Life Quote Journal. Or maybe that was a previous conversation about Maria's publication.
That's right.
And I was a contributing writer in the April edition, in the premiere edition, and I'm going to write. What's that?
Me too. Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
We both
That's
are.
right.
That's cool.
And then I will also be writing an article for the November issue, which is the gratitude issue. I've created a tag one sheet, so people can go to that Linktree site and download the tag one sheet, so they can practice the attitude of gratitude every day. They can put it on their wall, or keep it as a screenshot, whatever they want to do. I also have an online store, because I thought that when live events start up again, it'd be kind of nice for people, kids or adults, to have a T-shirt where they can be reminded of the attitude of gratitude, or maybe they can be asked about it and they can explain it and help share it. So I have the Chris D.T. Gordon's Tag and Pop Shop on that site, where I have some T-shirts, hats, iPhone cases, lots of different things. And I feel that, in fact, do I have one of the hats here? Yeah, I have my hat here. Being like Corey, being follically challenged, The hat comes into play a lot here in Minnesota, so you can see the tag logo there.
Tag, yeah.
And then I have my LinkedIn site, the Instagram site, just so I can reach out and inspire people with my message.
That's great.
Because
So, Chris, I noticed that you said something that you put together an online course. So what are you teaching in your online course?
Well, I take the attitude of gratitude and I go into it into greater depth than I would my signature talk. I spend 3 weeks total. The first week is on the T. We talk about the benefits of being thankful. We go into a lot of studies. There's a study that I illuminate from the University of California, Berkeley, that talks about how gratitude can affect us on a psychological, physical, and social level. And then we spend a week on acknowledging the appreciated, and then a third week on ways we can give others to be a way to be grateful. And studies have shown that it takes around 21 days to develop a habit. So I figured, this is a 3-week course. By the end of that third week, hopefully someone taking the course will be able to have a greater sense of gratitude, an attitude of gratitude, if you will, that they can then share with others, because ultimately that's what I want to do.
Good for you. I love it. That's awesome. So, so what's next with you?
I'm always reaching out to people to find speaking engagements. I email 25 schools a week. At least I try to keep that always going. I'm starting out here in Minnesota. I'm going to branch outward. But I've been doing some Zoom presentations. In fact, earlier this month, I spoke to a group in Brighton, Colorado. And that was very entertaining and very meaningful to me, because it was for an award ceremony for students who have overcome some kind of adversity, and to show them that, yes, adults go through this too. You are not alone. We are proud of you. Keep going. You will have some adversity as you get older, but you can do it. And then actually I presented to a high school group in Nepal at the beginning of last month.
That's exciting.
I had to wake up really early for that one. I can honestly say, Kelly, I have spoken professionally at 5:15 in the morning. And it's nothing I want to do on a regular basis, but I know I can do it. So I have that feather in my cap. And so I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you love what you do, it doesn't matter what time it is. One of my coaches is in New Zealand, and so he gets up at 3-4 in the morning sometimes to coach us. So yeah. But when you love it, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal.
Nope. And I'm one who really likes the novelty of new experiences. It's always good for a story. And so the fact that I can say I spoke to students in Nepal is something I really take pride in.
Right.
So I'm gonna keep looking for those speaking opportunities. I'm going to work on how I can make the world better through my message and my story, through the online course and my podcast. I'm going to keep training for qualifying for Boston. Hopefully I'll be taking my black belt test this year sometime. The funny thing about being 46 years old and a runner and a Taekwondo student, your hip flexors aren't very flexy. So I got to work on that, but it's something I enjoy working on.
Okay, so Chris, what is one of your favorite books that has made one of the biggest impacts in your life?
Well, I could be self-serving and say Blue Talks presents Business Life and Universe Volume 3. But, I have to say one of them is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Yeah. Okay. And why?
Because it really illuminates the power of 1%. If you could do 1% better today than you were yesterday, over a long span of time, that growth is exponential. And so by being consistent, and it really ties into my message of pass on perfection and go for greatness. Kelly, being someone with skin grafts yourself, we are not perfect. We will never have a, perfect body. So perfection is futile to try to go for. However, if I stay consistent in my endeavors, if I give my 100% every time, and I am diligent in my beliefs and my heart is in the right place, I might reach perfection once in a while, given the situation, but I will always be great. So that's why I say pass on perfection and go for greatness.
And what I do is I say, instead of thriving for perfection, just thrive for near perfect. Because I feel like striving for perfection sets you up for failure. Whereas if you strive for near perfect, then you win every time.
Yep.
Because it allows a little bit of margin of error. And I find too, this is something I told a friend of mine a few months ago, and we were having that discussion about perfection. And the problem with perfectionists is that once they've reached that goal, they raise it higher so that they can't achieve it. Right? And he said that to me. He said, "Oh my God, you're so right. That's exactly what I do. As soon as I reach the goal of perfect, I raise it higher." Yeah.
Yeah, and so I really do like going for greatness, because not only do I enjoy reaching that goal, achieving that goal, but I also have greater joy in the journey.
Right.
Because as I'm training for this marathon, whenever it happens, I'm enjoying the morning spent on the treadmill when it's raining outside, as it is now, or the days on the when I'm running with my running club friends, or when I have to wake up real early and the sun's blazing in the afternoon, I have to make sure I get my run in before then. Being able to take joy in the practice, and because I know that if I keep doing it, I will reach that greatness.
That's right. It's all about achieving our goals and our dreams, and we all have them, and we're all capable of doing it. We just have to take that action towards it.
Yes.
Yeah. That is so awesome. So Chris, we're going to be wrapping up here. So where can people reach out to you?
Yep, they can, like I said before, they can reach out to me at linktr.ee/Chris DT Gordon. Again, those are my speaking websites. You can enter your email address to keep up with me. I have a weekly email that I send out. You can see what I'm doing in terms of speaking. If you want to reach out to me for my speaking talents and engagements, you can also email me at chrisdtgordon@gmail.com. I'm always willing to learn from people and and hear new voices. So you can reach out to me those ways. Also find me on Facebook at Chris DT Gordon, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those places.
That's excellent. I love it. I love it. I love the work that you do, and it's it's so important to help people get what they need. So thank you so much for being up today. And like Cody always says, let's call it to be continued. So have a great day.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. You have a great day yourself. And hi.
Hi.
You must be Janet, right?
I'm Sarah.
Sarah, I'm sorry. I knew it was a 5-letter name.
You were close.
Yes. So it had 8 in it as well. So nice to meet you, Sarah. I've seen you on Facebook.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Chris. I've enjoyed listening to you backstage.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I hope you have a good conversation with Kelly, and we'll talk with you guys later.
Okay, bye, Chris.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Kelly. It's lovely to meet you.
Good, great to meet you too. So it looks like we're having an echo problem. And I know with one of our other guests, we had the same problem. So what we had to do is every time she wasn't talking, she had to mute herself. So
Okay.
let's try that and see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, see, there it is. It's so weird. Okay, Hank. So, tell us about yourself. That's how we start. We want to know more about you. And I don't have a bio to read, and I don't want to read a bio. We would love for you to just kind of introduce yourself and who you are and where you came from and why you're here, and then let's just start the conversation, okay?
Absolutely. So my name's Sarah Willoughby, and I'm originally from the UK, and I moved to Melbourne, Australia about 12 years ago. And I'm really blessed to live by the sea with my 3 beautiful children. And I have moved from spending 10 years working in the corporate world, so working my way up the corporate ladder, spent 6 years at university, and got there and kind of went, is this it? Is this really what I want to be doing? In the middle of that, I was going through this journey through secondary infertility to have my second child, and I just had the biggest wake-up call ever, and I ended up in intensive care. And that's when I really got to look at myself and look at my life. And from there, I started making massive life changes, moved over to Australia, and began working as a coach and an energy healer and an author, speaker, and infertility coach. So my life has fundamentally changed over the last 10-15 years, but I absolutely love what I do, and I love helping people to find their own truth, which is basically the journey that I've been on.
Find your own truth. Oh, yeah, isn't that true? Like, we all need to find that truth. Why are we here? Right? Like, well, what is our purpose? And, where can we go from here? So can you share more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if I reflect on my own life, I had 2 drivers. I was a people pleaser and I was a perfectionist. You can imagine the stress that causes is absolutely crazy. But I was young and I didn't really realize that I could change that. And I was actually thinking about what was one of the life-defining moments that I realized that I wanted to do something different, but I didn't know how to get there. And it was actually when I was working in the corporate world, and I'd been tasked with organizing this massive awards ceremony. So I was still a graduate trainee. I had to work with this team. I had to pull together this awards ceremony for people from France, Germany, Spain, and the UK. First one that was ever done. And part of that was organizing this motivational speaker, a man called Robin Siegler. And he was stood on stage. He was an author, he was a motivational speaker, and he'd overcome cancer. And he was now talking about his journey, and he'd done amazing things like go up Mount Everest. And I was crying when he was talking. It really hit home, and I was like, wow, I want to do what you do. I want to find my truth, but what's my story? I didn't have a story at that point. I was only 24. Mm-hmm. Fast forward almost 20 years, and whether I like it or not, I have my story. I have that period of struggling to have a second child and lying in bed in intensive care thinking, if this is it, have I lived my best life? And the answer was no. So through my own journey of finding my truth, I'm able to help people who also feel stuck and also sort of have that desire and that inner knowing, like you said, that there's more to life, there's that purpose that we all have, but how do we actually get there? So it's about helping people to connect with themselves, to tune in, to love themselves, and to start listening to that inner guidance that we all have, but we often ignore and distract ourselves with life.
Isn't that the truth? I know that very well. A lot of times we hear that little whisper of our heart and we just don't pay attention to it until we're hit over the head with a 2x4. And then it's like, oh yeah. But I think part of it too is that when we hear that little whisper, we just think it's our own thoughts, but we don't know that it's our higher power or our spirit that's trying to guide us. Right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it is just a whisper often, isn't it? And that's why we doubt it. I think we expect to have that, you know, almighty roar that's like, stop what you're doing. You need to do it this way. But sometimes it's literally stop and listen. You know, you're on the right path. And I think that's what's beautiful about it. And when you learn to connect with self very deeply and you learn to tune in, you don't need the massive roar because you trust and you know, because you're so used to doing it. And definitely practice makes perfect. And I've made some mistakes along the way. And I've definitely had those massive roars where it's like literally stop, you have to change what you're doing. But now I think I get those subtle messages a lot sooner, which is obviously helpful. So I don't have to be hit around the head. Yeah, so... But it's a beautiful process. I think that journey back to self, that journey back to who we really are and why we're here is the most amazing journey that if we can really embrace it, is really fulfilling.
Yeah, it's cool. So what do you do with people now? What do you, like, are you coaching people? Are you writing more books? Like, what else are you doing?
Yeah, so I work with clients, so I coach people, which I absolutely love. And obviously last year with Melbourne being in lockdown for 7 months, well, actually my business was closed for 9 months of last year to face-to-face clients. So I moved very much from working, you know, in person to working online. And what I do works just as effectively online. Energy is energy and connection is connection, no matter where you are. So I coach people, I do energy healing, and I write as well. So I was obviously an author in Blue Chalks 3, and I know Chris showed it just as he...
That's right, you're in the third one, aren't you?
Yes, but so that was very exciting. So thank you for your help with that. That's been, you know, a dream of mine for such a long time. But I am also writing my own book at the moment as well about my journey to self-love through secondary infertility. So I'm in the editing process of that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it will be out very soon. So yeah, I'm just really hoping to be able to reach women and couples who feel very isolated on their journey through infertility. It's something that we don't talk about. There's a lot of silence and stigma around it, yet it affects so many people all around the world, and everybody's suffering behind closed doors, you know, particularly at the moment with COVID and IVF cycles being cancelled and people not being able to get that support that they would normally have. So I really hope that this book reaches the right people and helps people to heal and realize that with or without a baby, they are enough. I think that's the fundamental journey that I went on, was that journey of acceptance and surrender of, I can't control this. What's going on? I can only be in charge of how I respond to it and how I respond to life. And then lo and behold, when you do that, everything changes and everything sort of falls into place as it's meant to, whatever is for your higher, you know, your highest good.
I have a daughter, and then I lost a baby. So I had a stillborn baby at 7 months. And this story is sometimes hard for me to tell. When I was married, my husband at that time didn't want to have more kids. And so when I was 5 months pregnant with her, I remember looking down at my belly and saying, it's okay if you don't make it, because he doesn't want you. And sure enough, 2 months later, I lost her. And so I had a lot of guilt over that, because I thought, of course, it was my fault, right? Because I felt like I had willed her to die. And so it was very traumatizing to go over that or to move through that. And I honestly believe that story was more painful for me than going through my divorce or going through, my burn tragedy of me getting burnt as a 2-year-old. going through losing my baby was harder than ever. And but then when I got pregnant for the third time, and then I found out it was twins, I was like, okay, I now see the gift in losing her. And because if we would have had her, we would have stopped at the two girls and we never would have had the boys. And so I always say that, the gift in losing her is that she's up in heaven with, my dad and, my grandparents, and her family is up in heaven and driving them crazy. And, I've got the twin boys driving me crazy down here on earth. And so that helped me to see the gift in the tragedy. So, what are some of the strategies that you would tell people to do when they're going through that type of a tragedy? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so I just want to say sorry, and I have heard that part of your story before, and it really deeply resonated with me when I heard it, and obviously speaking to you now. I think when we go through, like you said, when we go through loss, wow, we learn how to love so much deeper. I remember when it had taken me 2 years to conceive my second baby, and when I lost them, I was devastated. And what was hard was that people didn't perceive that was a baby. To a lot of people it was a group of cells because it was, still a miscarriage. But to me, it was my child, and I'd felt them grow inside me, and I'd felt that connection from such an early point in the pregnancy. So I had to do a lot of healing around that. And I think I was really lucky that I met a chaplain when I was going through. I had to have a D&C. And when I was, after the operation, I was really struggling. And I spoke to the hospital chaplain, and she was the first person and probably the only person that recognized that as a baby to me. And she phoned me up a number of days later. She asked how I was doing, and she actually offered me a funeral service, like a proper funeral. And wow, that was powerful in terms of having that closure. And so I guess some of my advice would be to actually allow yourself to grieve for that loss and to honor your baby's memory. And I don't think that we do that enough. And that can be something that you do privately. It can be something you do with your partner. It can be something you do with close friends and family. Whether you plant a tree, whether you read poems, or, light a candle, whatever works for you. But I think honoring that loss is really important. When I lost my twins a number of years later, I didn't do that. But I think I had already healed through the first miscarriage. So I didn't necessarily need to do that the second time. And also I was in the middle of emigrating over to Australia. So, when I was emigrating over here, I had 8 weeks of packing my life up and moving over here. And it was in that time that I lost one twin and then the other one. So I had other things to, I guess, distract myself with. But really getting still and listening to yourself, connecting with what you need. So for me, meditation is that thing that I draw on so frequently. Meditation is that thing that saved my life when I was in intensive care. I couldn't have coped with the physical and emotional trauma without it. And just getting still, focusing on your breath, even for just 2 minutes every day, giving yourself the opportunity to get out of your head, because wow, we're cruel to ourselves. What we say to ourselves in our head is just so harsh, and we wouldn't dream of saying that to other people. But when we connect with our breath, that's when we connect with our soul. That's when we connect with the essence of who we really are and why we're here, and our thoughts become more loving. And I think we really need that, don't we? Through that process of loss, we really need to be kind to self and to love self, and to know, like you said, it's not our fault. And I so needed to hear that message. It was not my fault. And I didn't hear that enough. And if anybody's watching today that's going through miscarriage or has lost, a baby, had a stillbirth, then please hear that. If you hear nothing else this conversation, it's not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong. And like you said, Kelly, there will be a gift, there will be a blessing in the tragedy. At some point you will be able to look back at that and heal and move forward. So yeah, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, you're very right. Because a lot of people say that, well, how can there be a gift in a death? Right? And it was like, that was the way that I was able to pull through it. And also, like you say, how it's not your fault. When they did the autopsy on her and told me that her umbilical cord had grown shut instead of open, that too proved to me that it wasn't my fault. Because of course, that's all I was doing, was blaming myself. And I was thinking about, well, what did I do wrong? Like, it was clearly my fault she died in me, because she was in me. So it had to be my fault. Right. And so it was so important to have that autopsy so that I could take away that blame that I had for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important part of the healing process. We're not taught about self-forgiveness, are we? You know, through life we're taught as small children, you need to forgive other people for their part in a falling out or a disagreement. But how often are we actually taught as children about self-forgiveness? I never remember being told that self-forgiveness was actually one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves. One of the most powerful gifts we can give, not just to ourselves, but to other people. And again, self-forgiveness has been a massive part of my journey and a massive part of my transformation and what I work with so many of my clients on, because we don't give ourselves permission just to be kinder, to be gentle, to heal ourselves in that way.
Okay, so how do you teach people how to forgive themselves? Because that's right?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie, it's not an easy process. I think the starting point is deeply connecting to self. So however you do that, I've obviously mentioned meditation, and meditation is such a powerful tool that is available to everybody. It's free, it's accessible, it's something you can do every single day. So if people haven't already meditated, I really encourage people to try that. And there's so many different ways that you can meditate, whether it's, focusing on your breath, whether it's a guided meditation, a walking meditation. One of the things I love to do is a walking meditation in nature. And nature is another really powerful tool that is often free on our doorstep. I know there are restrictions at the moment, but even just going outside and breathing properly helps you to connect very deeply with self. Once you learn to tune into your heart, you can hear the messages that you're being given. You can start to minimize that monkey chatter that we all have, which can be very self-deprecating. And once we actually acknowledge where we're at, I think because we're so busy in life, we distract ourselves, that we're not prepared to actually look at ourselves and acknowledge what we're telling ourselves. So the first part is hearing. And in order to hear what we're saying to ourselves, in order to forgive ourselves, we have to be able to tune in. So I do a lot of work with my clients. I'm an energy healer, so I learned Reiki, and we can connect very deeply with self. Sometimes when somebody lies on my couch, that's the first time that they've actually been still. The first time that they've given themselves permission just to be and not do. So that would be a starting point that I would recommend everybody tries, is just that sitting in silence and starting to breathe in your natural rhythm. And slowly you will realize that the self-talk starts to soften. And I think once you're in that place of it starting to soften, then you can either through a guided meditation, you can do it. There's lots of forgiveness meditations. I've got one that I put together last year in COVID. My son wrote the guitar music, the introductory guitar music for that, which was a beautiful collaboration, something really nice to do in really difficult times. So I have a forgiveness meditation, and I think that's a really beautiful way. It's a guided way to help you to recognize where you're at, what your thoughts are, and you'll be surprised by some of the stuff that comes up too. Some of the forgiveness things that we need to work on are things from our childhood that we might have forgotten about. You know, it might have been an argument with a friend in the playground when we were 7 years old and we didn't realize that we'd actually held on to that in some way. So just giving ourselves space to connect with our truth is where we begin. And then it is a process. I'm not going to lie, it is a process. It's a difficult one, but we've got to surrender to be able to just allow ourselves to have the space to be able to do that work. But surrendering is a big part of it too.
Exactly. I think surrender is probably one of the hardest things to do too. Like if someone says, ask you, how do you teach someone to surrender? How do you surrender? What do you do? What are the steps?
I think surrendering, again, is something that takes practice and is something that starting with small things. So we could be going through a massive life crisis and we could surrender because we have no alternative. So I think a lot of people have been put in a state of having to surrender to life because of COVID, because circumstances have changed, because their lives have been turned upside down. So people can get to a place of surrender through a crisis where they're literally on their knees and like, universe, I don't know what to do anymore, help me. And that's where, when we ask for help, part of surrendering is asking the universe for help. And the universe can't come and support us and help us until we ask for help. So when we ask for help, that's an important part of the surrendering. If we want to practice surrendering without having the life crisis, let's do it in sort of small bite-sized chunks. Surrender, it can be really simple. So for me, I've always been somebody who likes to be in control. Now I've learned the hard way that we can control nothing in life. We can be in charge of how we respond to things, but we can't control. So I can start to surrender, and I have done obviously over the years, around little things like, okay, I'm running late, stuck in traffic. Normally my old me would have beat myself up about that. Oh, you left late. Why are we in this situation again? Now you're going to be late. What are the consequences of that? And you go down this massive kind of, like rabbit hole of self-deprecation. Noticing what you're doing and stopping and breathing changes your energy and is part of that surrender. So starting with sort of small life lessons around, okay, let's put this in perspective. So a lot of work around mindset too. Let's put this in perspective. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to be late. Is the world going to end? Probably not. And then remembering how it feels when you either get there on time because the universe steps in to support you and you find a quicker way there, or the event starts late anyway, so it doesn't matter. And holding on to that memory of how it feels. So it's like building blocks, I think. I remember the first time I completely surrendered to my own life was when I moved over to Australia and I just lost my twins. And I was lying on my bed and we'd had no jobs to go to. We didn't know anybody. We'd packed our lives up and we'd moved over. And I remember lying on my bed thinking, please don't ever let me forget this moment, because for the first time in my life, I just let go. And there was a lot of trust involved in that because obviously we'd had to leave behind our old life to make way for the new one. But that feeling, once you feel it, you can go back into that feeling time and time again. And I draw on that strength to be able to help me with the next challenge. And certainly last year was a really challenging year for me. And I drew on that feeling of lying on my bed in 2009 when I first moved to Australia. I was like, just go back to that moment, just trust. Everything's going to be okay. This is all happening for your highest good. You're going to be okay. So, yeah, lots of small steps. Or you can go for the massive crisis and surrender that way. But you can practice it for sure.
That's excellent. Surrender. You make it sound so easy. you do, but it's true. It can be that easy if you just let it happen, right?
I think everything is a decision, isn't it? About this point in time of saying enough's enough. And maybe I got to a point in that moment where I literally was at the end of what I could take in life. I'd been through a lot of stress and trauma at that first real memorable time of surrendering. But our mindset is so powerful. And I think one of the other things I've learned is the word yet is really helpful. So when we're going through this self-deprecating talk, if we put the word yet on the end of it, it changes the energy of everything. It changes how we feel. So that can be another just really subtle tool that we can draw on to change the self-talk, which we do take on and often don't realize.
I've been noticing that with myself, where I started using the word yet. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, so I'm not that yet. It doesn't mean I won't be, I'm just not there yet. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean I won't accomplish it. It just means that it's coming. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It really just changes the way that we view the world, doesn't it? When we do that, it's a really beautiful process. I think, really empowering.
Yeah, because when you don't use the word yet, it's like you're saying it's final. But when you use the word yet at the end of it, then it's like you're saying, but it's still coming.
Yeah, it's always there. It's just about learning surrender and then learning the power of manifestation too. And a big part of my surrendering, I think, when I think about it now, has been journaling, has been writing down through my meditations and through sitting in silence, is just writing, journaling like a stream of consciousness. What do you need me to do today? What do I need to hear today? Or asking a specific question to myself and then writing stuff down. When I recently looked back through all the journals that I'd written over the years and kept, it was amazing how many things had transpired. And that happened because I had faith and trust and surrender. But when I was writing it, I can remember thinking, no, this isn't going to happen. This is crazy. This is like way over there and out there. But it was the yet. It hadn't happened yet. Just as I sat in that talk with Robin Siegler when I was 24 years old, looking at the stage thinking, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what my soul knew I needed to do. But I wasn't there yet. But I just didn't know it at the time.
Right. I love that. I think it's so cool. Okay, so what's the next step?
The next step for my life or the next step for people in surrendering?
Oh.
The next step in my life is to get my message out to more people, is to help more people to heal and to love themselves and to achieve more, fulfill their potential, and basically just transform their lives. So the very next thing for me is getting my second book out there, doing more podcasts and talks, connecting with like-minded people, and just really helping people to know that they're not alone wherever they're at on their journey. They may not be where they want to be yet, but it's a part of a process and they can get there. So that's my sort of big picture. And of course, there's lots of things in the middle of all of that I don't know what that looks like. I liken life to a jigsaw puzzle where we have all these pieces, but we can't quite see them all yet. And we have to trust the universe that they'll be put into the jigsaw at the right time and everything will slowly be revealed. And I think if we knew everything, we would just be completely overwhelmed, right? We would just be like, whoa, I'm not going to do that. That's too much. But when we break it down into the small steps and we look back at life, we can see how all the dots join up, which is really exciting. And in terms of where people need to go and what they can focus on, start with meditation. I always say that to my clients. I know I've mentioned that a number of times, and a lot of my clients are like, oh, you're on your meditation soapbox. But it truly changed my life. And then from there, I moved on to mindfulness. So mindfulness is also a really good tool just to bring you back to that present moment, because when we know that the past's already gone and dwelling on the past is not helpful, and worrying about the future that may never come isn't helpful either, we spend more time in the moment. That's where true change happens. Right here, right now, everything that we decide right now is helping shape the rest of our lives. And I think we don't often realize how powerful that is. So keep coming back to this moment, keep coming back to self. If this conversation is resonating with people, write down, what is it that you are intending to do right now? What is one thing, one small step that you can take to move you that little bit closer to your dream, to achieving your full potential, whatever that is? Because when we get still, we know deep, deep, deep down what it is that we want to do and why we're here. We just need to connect to be able to hear that.
I was going to ask you, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Because I feel like I've seen people use mindfulness as the word to replace the word meditation. So it sounds like you have a different explanation for what mindfulness is versus meditation. So can you share what the differences are?
Yeah, I think those words, you're right, those words are used interchangeably, and sometimes I question myself and I'm like, oh, did I learn something different? But how I learned it. So meditation for me is very much about sitting in silence, is sitting with your breath and just breathing and being. And like I said earlier, you can do that in a number of different ways. So you can do that very sort of passively, or you can do it through a walking meditation. You can do it through a guided meditation. But for me, how I differentiate between meditation and mindfulness is that mindfulness is something that I do when my eyes are open, when I'm in the space. So for example, I could spend 2 hours writing my book, and in amongst that, my mind could start wandering off. So every couple of minutes, I would sit and I would look at something in the room, and I'd be like, okay, I've got a glass of water here. What does the glass look like? And you're doing this sort of in your mind. You're noticing the glass. You're noticing the water in your glass. You're noticing, you could pick it up. You could feel it. How does this feel? So those things, breaking up your day by just looking around your space and noticing what's in your space, instantly brings you back to the present moment without you having to close your eyes. So it's actually something that can be really powerful if you're at work and if you're in an office and you don't have the ability to keep tuning into your breath and closing your eyes. You can just, be writing an email and then be like, right, okay, I'm distracted. Come back to the here and now. What can I focus on? And it takes you right back to your breath, as with meditation. So it's very subtle difference, but that is what works for me. And again, mindfulness is very powerful. Through my mindfulness training, I think a couple of things that really resonated with me when I was learning mindfulness was about the power of walking towards those things that fear us. So not resisting change, walking towards that, which was a very powerful analogy at the time that I didn't fully understand how much that was going to change my life. And walking towards our pain, breathing into our physical pain. And that was something that when I was going through childbirth and when I was in intensive care, if I hadn't have known about breathing into my pain, which I learned through my mindfulness training, I'm not sure I would have coped with it, because morphine didn't even touch the surface of my pain. So there were lots of different things that I learned. We also learned in mindfulness about body awareness, so scanning our body and lying. Again, this was done with our eyes closed, but lying and noticing our bodies and how our breath felt in our bodies in particular places. So that was kind of like a body scan awareness. I learned that through mindfulness, which is more similar to meditation. But for me, mindfulness is very much about being eyes open, awake, and just bringing myself back to the present moment actively.
Being very present in that moment.
Yes, being actively present is the best way that I describe it. So that's how it works for me. I'm sure other people do it very differently, but that's how I implement it in my day-to-day life and make it a very practical tool and technique. Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about books. So what is your favorite book? Tell us about your favorite book.
Okay. I just want to show this book. So this is the book that started my journey to authorship and speaking. So Natural Born Winners, Robin Siegler. It's a book that a lot of people won't have heard of, to be honest. So that's where it started for me. One of my favorite books is Anita Moorjani's Dying to Be Me. I don't know whether you've read that book.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and what I love about Anita and her work is that it's just so raw, and I love that transformation. She talks about, so Anita's story is basically that she, for those that haven't read it, is that she had cancer, she was terminal, she had family members coming to say goodbye to her as she lay in hospital in a coma. And then she actually crossed over to the other side, and she met, and fill me in if I get any of this wrong, join in, but she met her father and spoke to her father, and he sort of said to her, it's not your time. And when she could see everything happening, couldn't she, playing out, so she could hear and see what the nurses and doctors were saying, and there were conversations at the end of the corridor, and she could be with her brother on the plane when he was flying to say goodbye. And when she came back, she knew that she was healed from cancer, but the doctors were just like, whoa, we don't know how to explain this. So she still went through treatment for cancer, but she knew that she was already healed. And what I love about her story is that there's all the medical evidence there. There's all the test results. There's all the doctors supporting her story. And she had this massive insight into how she hadn't been her best friend. She hadn't loved herself. She'd strived for perfectionism. And I know you and Chris were talking just before I came on about perfectionism and how detrimental that can be. And when she just let go of all of that, her whole life just unfolded. And Dr. Wayne Dyer found her story and supported her, and she started traveling around the world with him. And I loved that beautiful relationship that they developed before he passed. And I just love the fact that she comes from her heart. Her work is just so heart-centered and so open, and she's really helped take, for me, she's helped take, not that I had fear of passing over, but I think for a lot of people, she would help people if they're at that point, that fear of what happens next. She writes so beautifully and takes away that fear.
Yeah, I actually got to meet Wayne Dyer. So I got to meet him 3 months before he passed away at a conference in Maui. And so, yeah, I love that story because a lot of times we just think life is over. And she brought it herself back to life and realized that it was all about love. And we need to spend more time in love. And one of the messages that I learned from Wayne Dyer is that we cannot be in fear and love at the same time. And when we do things out of fear, it fails. But when we do things out of love, we succeed. And so that's why we need to do more things out of love. So
Absolutely. And that's been a revelation for me, knowing that there's only two emotions, love and fear. And what sits underneath fear is anger and shame and guilt and all those perceived negative emotions, but they all have a place. And that when we, like you said, when we move to love, wow, that's when life really changes for all of us. When we really connect with our truth, the essence of who we are, we realize that everything else is just noise. That's not why we're here, and we don't need that. But yeah, I didn't manage to talk to Dr. Wayne Dyer, but he came to Melbourne shortly before he passed. He was on stage. He was actually struggling with a lot of pain at the time. So he came on and did a session and then had to go off. And one of the other people that was there was doing tapping on him, EFT on him. And then he was able to come back out and finish the talk, but he wasn't able to sign books and sort of do photos and all that sort of thing. And I remember thinking at the time, it's okay, I'll see him again, I'll come back, he'll come back next year. And then of course he didn't. So it was a real shame, because he had such a massive impact on my life too. And I feel very blessed that I've got to read his books and actually be in his energy and just be with him, because his love, it just shines from, it just shone from him, didn't it? It was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was. So such a beautiful story. Okay, so Sarah, we're gonna wrap it up here. To share, how can people connect with you? How can they find you and get involved in your work?
Sure. So the best way is through my website, which is sarahwilloughby.com.au. And if people sign up for my weekly newsletter, then there's my free breathing meditation that they can download. So I'd love people to go there. I'm also on LinkedIn, which is Sarah Willoughby 2019, and Instagram and Facebook, Sarah Willoughby Australia. So basically search my name and you will find me.
That's excellent. Okay, so Sarah, any last words that you'd like to share with everybody?
I think I would just like to remind people to follow their own truth. And I wish this is something that I had done from a much younger age, but I spent so much time worrying about other people's opinions and following the advice that other people gave me for the path that they saw for me. And I wish that I had learnt to connect with self much sooner, so that I could listen to my soul, I could listen to my heart, I could trust my intuition, and that would always guide me in the right direction. So if anybody's feeling a bit lost and a bit overwhelmed, start connecting with self, however you do that. And you can do that through simple things like weeding the garden. And I've got a big garden to weed, so I used to do that a lot. But, just being out in nature, meditation, sitting in silence, writing, even doing exercise, it takes you into a different space where you can start to connect with self. And I think that's the starting point, so that we live our own life, not the life that others perceive for us. And I think that's really powerful.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for being here with us, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. And, I want to encourage everybody, connect with Sarah, connect with her work, because she's got some amazing stuff that's going on that's going to help you. And so anyways, you are our last guest of the day, but not the least. Definitely we love having everybody here and love sharing your message, because you've got such a beautiful message to share in the world. And so we're going to wrap it up for today, and we hope to see you guys all back tomorrow, where we have 5 more guests. So thank you, everybody, and we shall see you tomorrow. And thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Kelly. I've loved chatting to you. Thanks for everything you do too, and shining your beautiful light.
Oh, you're very welcome. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.